Okay.
Dr. Roy Spicer.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gary Null, and this is our special webinar on common sense tips for helping minimize exposure to the coronavirus. Our webmaster in the background is Glenn. He is arranging all this. However, I'm noticing that only about half the participants of what is a completely sold out and filled up webinar are online. My thought is that many people possibly forgot to move their clock ahead today as we go on daylight savings time springing ahead 1 hour. Therefore, they could be missing an hour of this presentation. If that is the case, Glenn will make this available for them to download so they can then listen to the entire thing from beginning to end. I also understand that a small number of people, I was told about 6 of you, do not have the capacity to do this webinar over a computer, but rather are doing it over a telephone, in which case when we go to the end of the webinar, we'll be showing a special film, a film that is designed to help you build your immune system. So those individuals will be able to contact Glenn directly, as he will have their names, and send them a copy of the film, or give them a copy where they can, on a closed channel on YouTube, so they can watch it. So everybody will get everything today, even if not everyone is here at the very beginning. But for those of you who are at the beginning, I'd like to welcome you. And you'll also be hearing from 2 other panelists, Dr. Roy Spicer, a scientist, and he'll tell you about his own background and his degrees, and also Richard Gale. And both have a strong background in science, and they will be sharing specific and different information about this. I'm going to ask Roy to mute your phone, please, Richard, because there's noise in your background, and people will be able to hear that noise and it will distract them. Now, what is the purpose of this? First, this is a public service. There's nothing being sold, nothing advertised, nothing promoted. No, not at all. Instead, we believe that we have an opportunity to learn some new insights that will help you in every part of your health and your life. For years, many of my friends and family members thought that I was eccentric when it came to my hygiene, my interest in germs. They thought that I was just being germophobic. Today, they realize that no, that was intentional awareness of the consequences of learning how to live in balance with microorganisms including friendly bacteria in our body, in our environment, and those that are pathogenic or disease-producing. And it's this reluctance, or what we call intentional neglect, not to know something, because for different reasons. One of those is, what if we really had to be fully aware of what could possibly go wrong and how it could affect us if we didn't pay attention to just simply basic hygiene? As a result, we stay uninformed, and uninformed people are far more likely to have unintended consequences that's going to adversely affect them. So my goal is to complement the best of emergency medicine procedures, which is exemplary. You've heard me say 1,000 times, we do our best in emergencies when it comes to healthcare issues. We're not so good when it comes to other issues. Look at the emergency with Katrina and FEMA. Look at Puerto Rico. In fact, I'm visiting Puerto Rico at the invitation of a group of foundations in the next after 2 months to help them get back on their feet, but also show how they can prevent future disasters. The disaster they can't prevent, the hurricanes. What they can prevent is the consequences, showing them how to have sustainable food supplies and how to get in their own wells and have backup solar systems so they don't go months without clean water or sanitation. The government should do that. I shouldn't have to do that. The government should be teaching programs about food sustainability. I shouldn't have to go down to Puerto Rico to teach them that. But then again, the American government, in my opinion, has failed miserably at preventing disease. Our Surgeon General, the head of the U.S. Public Health System, the head of the CDC, the FDA, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, the National Cancer Institute. When was the last time you actually saw and understood important programs where they went into great detail about what we could do to prevent up to 90 or more % of all diseases like cancer, heart disease, diabetes? You haven't heard it because it doesn't exist. The advice we've always been gotten is don't drink too much alcohol and don't get too much sunlight. Well, that doesn't mean a whole lot in the way of preventing diseases, and it does nothing for coronavirus or any other virus. And by the way, what we're going to be discussing concerning the coronavirus today is just one piece of a larger puzzle. We're looking at other viruses as well: Epstein-Barr, cytomegalovirus, herpes 1, 2, and 6, and Coxsackie virus. In other words, we are living in a world of viruses and bacteria. Some are pathogenic, some are deadly, others are beneficial, as far as bacteria in particular. So I'm going to begin by taking you back in my own history and see if any of this resonates with you. Back in the 1970s, took my brothers and some friends down to join me with some of the research I was doing on the health of people living in the Amazon and the islands, Trinidad, Barbados, Jamaica, in the middle of Brazil, and how did they deal with disease? We know that a lot of pharmaceutical companies find very important medicinal value in some of these plants and then make drugs from them. Okay. So we're in a city, major city, Rio de Janeiro, and we're walking down a street just a couple blocks from the ocean, and I see a fruit stand. And then when we get up close, it's beautifully, just simply and beautifully designed with coconuts, all kind of put together, connected together. So the sides were all looking like coconuts, and inside you had these bags of all kinds of fruits. And what amazed me was I'd never seen any of these fruits in my life, let alone taste them. But it was really a juice bar. And there was this filter on the wall. And so my brother says, how much is the juice? It was only a couple bucks. So he decided to take a glass of juice, And I'm watching as the guy's preparing the juice. He has no gloves. He just has a little wooden block, and he's using a knife. And he has an apron, and he's wiped the knife on his apron. And as he is cutting the fruit, I said, Steve, you realize if you cut a vegetable or fruit, and if there is any contaminant on the skin itself, it's now smeared right across the entire cut fruit. And he said, well, you know, he's washing, and he said, do you wash all this? And the guy goes, yeah. But the trouble was he was washing it with a little filter that itself was all black and clogged. I said, take a look at that, Steve. You know the hygiene principles. You've been at the Institute 1,000 times. In any case, so he went ahead and had his juice. And then my other brother had juices. So I didn't have the juice. I simply said, sell me a whole bag of that. Just imagine a burlap bag filled with oranges, a big one, weighing probably 15 pounds. So he didn't know what to charge me. I said, well, how many juices can you get from that one bag? He said, about 5. And then charged me for 5 juices. Okay. So I took those bag of fruits back to the hotel. I bought multiple types of fruit. First time I'd ever seen a passion fruit. And these were big passion fruits, the size of softballs, not little tiny ones the size of lemons you normally see around Florida. And then I went downstairs and asked the concierge, what type of water do you sell? And he said, oh, we got special water, it's Brazilian water. But I looked at it, and I could actually see particulate matter, and there was no safety seal. And I said, no, I'll take the good, the other type, some brand that I can know is properly bottled or sterilized. And I bought gallons of it. In fact, my whole room was filled with fruits and some vegetables and water. So when my brothers and everyone else was in the shower, listen carefully, if you don't know about the quality of the water that's coming through that shower, and hot water is not sterilizing, you have to get up, way up in temperature, autoclave temperature, before you're going to sterilize the water. That's one way travelers get waterborne infections. Water goes into the eyes, the nose, the mouth. You drink some down. So what I did was simple. I stepped in the shower, poured some water over my body, probably a quart. Then I lathered down, shampooed, and, rub. And remember, lesson 2, when you're wiping your hands together under water with a little soap, it does very little. You've got to put soap on the middle of your palm, and then you have to allow that soap to be into your skin, massaged into your skin vigorously for at least 60 seconds. For example, you put your 2 palms together and you rub them back and forth. Then you put your fist in one palm and rub it around, clear up from the top of your fingers to the bottom of your hand, your palm. You do the opposite hand. Then you take one hand and lay it on top of the other from behind, and you go up and down between your fingers with the other fingers, and you reverse it. Then your hand is at least clean. Now you rinse off. You should always purchase alcohol no matter where you're staying, in any hotel or anywhere in the world, including in the United States. I take my own sheets with me because I don't trust the beds, and I don't want bed bugs. And also they can use chemicals in the sheets that you could be allergic to. And in any case, I simply go around the room, and all surface areas I alcohol. But here's how you alcohol to maximize the destruction of bacteria and viruses and parasites. You spray the top, like with a little mister, let it sit for 60 seconds, then vigorously rub it. That vigorous rubbing will break the shell of a virus or bacteria, and that way then at least it's clean. You don't use the same paper towel on 2 different surfaces. That would be like using the same piece of toilet paper when you go to the bathroom 2 times. Now that immediately, you would say, well, I wouldn't do that. Well, then why would you? Have you ever watched this? Have you ever watched someone mopping a floor in an office building? And they stick the mop in the bucket, and then they go up and down, and then they rinse it, and then they mop the floor. Then they put that same now dirty mop with dirty water back into dirty water, and then rinse it again, as if by getting up some of the gross material on the floor that now the floor is clean. No, it's not clean. You've just smeared it around. The same principle applies to everything else. So for every surface, you use a different tissue or paper towel. So now my room is clean. And by the way, when was the last time you cleaned the handle of your toilet when you flush? Because that's going to be almost always the handle that you use a hand you use to wipe with is the hand you're going to use to flush a toilet. Now you've contaminated it. Now you go to turn on the faucet, you've contaminated it. Simple, really simple. Ideally, you wash after you wipe. Now, if you can get a bidet, they're not expensive now. They've actually got bidets that fit right on. The Japanese were the good ones on this. They came up with a bidet. It's very common now that after you've defecated, it does all the cleaning and rinsing, even drying. I mean, they have that down to a science. Where in the United States, people wipe, they flush, and think they're clean. They're not. In fact, rarely do people clean their hands adequately enough, and especially people who have beards and mustaches because they're stroking them. And that's why every study that I've seen in the literature shows that with mustaches and beards, they're filled with feces. Now, if you could actually see the feces, if there was a piece of toilet paper off every speck of feces, I can assure you, people would say, what the hell's on my face? You got shit in your face, fella. Now, go kiss your partner and rub your little bearded face around the baby, and they're going to say, no. And this is the amazing part. We're dealing in cognitive dissonance here. We have to bring in hundreds of different points of view in order to understand what Occam's razor, the 14th century theologian who came up with a brilliant idea, and that is generally the best solution is the simplest one, but cut through everything it's not, hence the razor, to get to the solution. In which case then, gee, if you keep waking up every morning and you've got runny nose and you've got bad breath and you've got mucus in your eyes, then why don't you give up what you're eating that can be causing that allergic reaction? But instead, people will go through these torturous rationalizations of why that's less important than getting something to kill the symptoms. Well, think of I'm sure you've all seen that advertisement on television where a person eats something like a pizza or bacon, and now it starts smacking them around. But not to worry. Here's the remedy, a special type of antacid. Now think of that for a moment. You're eating something, hopefully at some point, other than just satisfying your food cravings or getting a dopamine hit. You're doing it because you want to get your nutrition in. But the very thing that you're eating to get nutrition, now all you're going to get are calories from it because it's going to be not properly digested. The antacid is going to make sure that you do not have full digestion. And so the whole purpose of eating, digestion, assimilation, utilization, and elimination is completely shortchanged. So we think it's great that we can eat anything. I can eat anything. Yeah? That means you're overfed and undernourished. So these are the things that we had better pay some attention to. So that's why I want you to pay attention to what you do when you start to eat something and you say, did I clean this? Okay. Well, it said it was triple washed. It said it right on the box. Did you look? Do you know whether or not it was triple washed by a standard that you could say is the right way to wash something? How do you know triple wash means proper triple wash? For example, have you ever taken any of the salads in or any of the produce that says triple washed and asked a lab, could you do a bacterial analysis of this? It's quick and easy. I'll bet not. The only way I would ever eat anything that's raw is if I personally washed it. Do you think I'd go to any of those vendors that have good orange juice, but they're in a machine and they all come down that little ramp and get, juiced, and you think, a nice cold glass of orange juice, but what about all the hands that touch that orange? Upwards of 20 different hands can touch a piece of produce before you eat it. None of those hands are clean. They don't have bidets and proper sanitation in the fields where the workers, the harvesters are working. So they've got everything in the world on their hands. Not a good idea. Then to assume that you can just pick up that cherry and eat it because it's right there on the stand and nothing's going to happen. Something is always going to happen, but it's on a spectrum. And the spectrum is, how old are you? What is the status of your immune system? How many different types of antibodies do you have to that, or none at all? And what is the likely outcome? If you take all that into consideration, now you understand why the coronavirus and the flu virus and other viruses are so deadly to children, babies, and senior citizens. Because we have so many people who have defective immune systems, and nowhere, ever, does anyone in public office tell us, maybe we ought to give some special attention to the children, the babies. Maybe we should take a look at what's really happening because we've got a problem and no one is dealing with it for political, ideological, and financial reasons. Corporate America is not going to be interested in your health unless they can profit from it. They don't care about the environment. Everyone else pays for their mistakes, and because they're a charter, given the strange rights of an individual, but without the liability of an individual, they consider profits more important than people's health. Even the products we're supposed to take for our health are frequently causing adverse health. If you doubt that, look at the article in the Journal of the American Medical Association that the third leading cause of death in the United States is iatrogenesis or medically induced, meaning your doctor, the drug, the hospital, the infection. And by the way, the AMA, typical of the AMA, was so lacking in objectivity and scholarship, it excluded infections, which means ulcers, which killed 82,000 people in 1 year, and malnutrition that was developed in a hospital itself. In fact, someone on this line right now, mother, was in a hospital after a stroke and was offered, bacon and the very food that can cause a stroke, as if there was no sense of awareness of cause and effect. So if you talk about having the wrong priorities, we have them. So let's just take a look at how you can take one piece of information and apply it across the board. I call it intellectual coupling, where you have one truth, but then instead of in a linear way of taking it, now I need another one, now I need another one. And why do I say this? This is a very important lesson I'm about to share with you, so please take note of it. I was a research fellow and a director of the Anti-Aging Medicine Division at the Institute of Applied Biology for 33 years. I was doing both basic and applied research. Very orthodox place. Everyone working on cancer treatments and drugs and pain treatments and drugs and replacements for methadone, etc. And yet they also were being infected. they also were not paying attention to the basics. They were unhealthy, they smoked, they drank, and they thought as long as they had a great pedigree, which they did, and came from great schools, which they did, and it published in peer-reviewed literature, which most did, that that's all they needed. That's hubris and arrogance and conceit, and boy did they have that in abundance. No humility, no desire to learn anything. And one week I noticed almost nobody every day, and I would go in the late afternoon, every day when I went in, nobody was there. There was just a couple of attendants, and I said, what's going on? They said, everyone's sick. Why? You have your UV lights over every door, and you have all your sterilizing equipment, and they keep the viral rooms out of bounds for anyone, unless you're working in there. Well, I don't know. No one knew. Okay. So I took a look around. I inspected everything, and I said, well, I got a hypothesis. So there was one bathroom everyone used, one toilet, and downstairs. And so we lathered it up with agar, and when someone went to the bathroom, went in, and some people, bacteriologists, virologists, did a measurement and found hundreds of thousands of bacteria were shown. And no one had thought that something as simple as putting down a toilet seat and washing their hands could prevent that. Hence, everybody was sick with something that they could have prevented with common sense. So the smartest, the brightest, the best were also some of the most misinformed. Now that's part of it. Another thing that we see in the scientific literature, and we see it all the time, is something like this. I'll just paraphrase. Vitamin C at high dosages was shown to have a positive impact upon colorectal cancer. Okay, good. Well, then the question is, if it had an impact upon colorectal cancer, surely by reason, quantitative thinking, or quanta thinking, it should also have had a positive impact upon other cancers. Oh, no, we can't say that. Why not? We have to do an individual study for every single system in the body that is known to have cancer. So if you have 226 different types of cancer, argument's sake, and you have, let's say, cancer of the brain and the eye and the larynx and the esophagus and the stomach and the liver and the kidneys and the bone and leukemias and lymphomas and the brain, you have to have a different study for every single one. At no point will anyone, I mean no one in science will say, maybe one cure in a body could represent a door opening to cure other things. They won't do that. It's just never done. You have this monotheism in science. You also have it in academia, where people are extremely close-minded to anything other than what they've specialized in. So, guess what's not being talked about with the current virus outbreak around the world? Nutrition. Guess what no one is talking about? That maybe there's some supplements that have natural antiviral and antibacterial qualities. No, that won't be discussed. You're looking at $8 billion, and what could go up to worldwide? $100 billion. So the race is on to see who's going to make the money off the vaccine over the next 1.5 to 3 years, or any other drugs that can impact this. Now, if everything worked, who cares, right? Our goal is to help prevent a disease, and our fallback position is treating a person so that they don't die. But this is a larger lesson, and then we're not even learning the basics. So I want to share the basics with you. For example, wash everything. Don't assume for a moment that something is clean because it's packaged. I just asked someone yesterday, I eat some of these golden mulberries. Now, I grow mulberries, but they're not in season but for about 3 weeks a year. And so I wanted some mulberries. They're very nutritious, high fiber, very good for you. but they're in a package, and they come from the Himalayas. So I simply ask this question. It was human hands without hygiene that could have any number of bacteria and viruses and parasites that harvested these. What happened after they were harvested to give me some confidence that I'm able to eat them safely? No answer. And, well, but they're certified organic. Yeah, and manure is certified organic. So you're going to go eat some manure and tell me it's good for you because it's organic? It's nonsense. Absolute nonsense. In fact, last year, some of the cases of salmonella was coming from people eating avocados, but it wasn't the avocado itself that was contaminated. It was the skin. But people weren't washing the skin. The assumption was, what's on the skin? I don't see anything in the skin. It's just an avocado. Well, all the people that handled that, someone had contaminated hands. Now it was on the avocado. Hence, you wash thoroughly and massage a piece of fruit or vegetable, whatever it is, until I do what's called the principle of three. You put a solvent on it, you massage it, and if it's a salad, you put it in water, and you agitate it, massage the leaves in case there are crevices where bacteria could be, and then you rinse it, and you do that 3 times. Spin it down, then you've got something that's clean, or as clean as you can reasonably make it. That's why I wash every avocado, then when I cut it and I peel it, I wash the final product again. I wash the knife. This morning I made myself, as I do every morning, I made myself at the very beginning of the morning, before I have my health drink, a fresh orange, lemon, and grapefruit juice. I harvested the fruits, but I washed them. Why? No one's touched them except me. Not true. I have a sprinkler system. That water's not filtered. And even though it's great for irrigation, it's not great because you don't know what's in it. So I washed it all thoroughly, then I cut it, then I washed the surface areas of what I just cut, then it was ready to juice. Now it's fine. I make a gallon of it, freeze most of it, and then take 1 cup twice a day, so I'm getting what I need. Simple. But hygiene is important because let's go back now, circle back around, that now the next morning, all 4 of my friends were sick in hospital. Not in hospital, in their beds. Diarrhea and vomiting and fatigue. So for the next 3 days, I had to hydrate them and went down to the local places and found herbs and other things I knew would help them and got some baby coconut, the immature green coconut. There's a gel in the side, and that would later become the water, and I would put that into a cup and blend it down with coconut water, and that's one of the best things in the world for food poisoning. And then I gave them charcoal caps. Anyhow, I went through a whole protocol, and they recovered fine. So we finished our trip down there with a little lesson learned. Both of us had the juices. The difference is I took a little extra time and effort and was laughed at. That's fine. I don't mind. I grew up in a family of all boys, so we laugh at each other. And if you take yourself too seriously, well, that's your problem. And so I've learned that my esoteric principles of hygiene make a difference. Ask any of my friends who will tell you, Gary doesn't have a wallet. He carries around an envelope, and it's embarrassing. We get up to go out, and he goes to pay, and he pulls out this envelope. And, of course, that's another rib for them. Yeah, why do I pull out an envelope? Because the money that's in the envelope is in at one time, and that envelope is gone. Your wallet, you're touching money that has, listen carefully, thousands of different bacteria and viruses on every single coin and dollar bill that you have. Now, your wallet is just a breeding ground. Your purse is a breeding ground. And, of course, some of you probably have a purse that it would take an archaeologist to find everything that's in the damn thing. My mother had one of those. It'd take her a half hour to find anything. But everything is contaminated. What do? Well, spray it with alcohol and wipe it down. Just takes a moment. So I put my money in an envelope. I don't care if people laugh. Let them laugh. You know? And then one of the best things you can do is take $500 if you have $500. I'm not assuming everyone does. And you put 100 in singles, 100 in fives, 100 in tens, and 200 in 20s. Do a double wash. Wash them twice. Now they're clean. There's nothing on them. Then, you know, put a rubber band or clip on them, and that way, when you know you're going out and you know you're going to need money, fine. You pay for that because that's clean. Always take one of those little disposable gloves, plastic gloves, and little latex gloves. And that way, when they give you back your change, you can put it in another envelope for your change. And I've never had anyone say no. They say, here's your change, $2.20. And I say, could you put it in the envelope, please? Yeah, they do. No big deal. That's the dirty money. I'm not touching it. And guess what? Because I'm not touching it, I'm not contaminating myself, because you're going to touch your mouth over 200 times a day. Now, there's no accurate measurement of how many times everyone touches their mouth and their nose, but that is where you bring into the body the vectors that can cause you to be sick. So that's what we do. Now, so clean your money, use a simple envelope, put that in it, another envelope, and then when you get in cabs, and by the way, it's a little tiny, inexpensive $20 seat cushion, and I take that with me everywhere. So every time I get into a cab, on a subway, on a plane, I sit on this completely clean seat cushion. So my back and my seat is done. I alcohol down the arms of the chair, the headrest in the back. I do the same thing for a movie, by the way. And that way, at least the surface area of what my body's on is not going to be contaminated, because you can contaminate dresses, pants, shirts, even if it's not your skin. And people don't realize that. In fact, there was not recently, it was about 3 years ago, I believe, there was a movie theater in Los Angeles, a new one that opened, and shortly thereafter they tested all the seats and they found feces on all the seats. What comes through pants when people don't wash and ends up on a seat. Now, if every time you went to sit on a seat, all the feces lit up and there was a little counter and said, okay, this seat contains X, you might think, wow, this is something we should pay attention to. Now, I'm just getting started, but we're going to turn this over to Richard Gell in just a second here. What I'm letting you know is nothing that I have suggested to you thus far about hygiene, washing, cleaning, not drinking water because it's local water, and how to exchange money so you don't get contaminated, how to thoroughly clean things. Don't assume that anything raw in a kitchen in a restaurant is clean. Take your own silverware, because some hand is touching all that silverware. You don't know the person's coughed their hand and then touched you. Have you ever seen someone sneeze and rub their hands together like, wow, it's gone? All that little snotty stuff that just came out of your mouth and nose, it's evaporated magically because you rubbed your hands together. God. And people do that all the time. Nobody thinks about it. Then someone shakes hands. No, just don't shake hands. Don't bump fists because your fists will be contaminated. Simply say, nice to meet you. And they'll understand today about this. We have to pay attention to the basics, and we haven't. As a result, that's one of the reasons that this thing is spreading. So I'm going to take a break now. We're going to be answering your questions, by the way, throughout the day. But we're going to introduce you now to Richard Gell, because Richard has to go in a little bit here, because we're going to go into more of a history of viruses and bacteria and what we need to know. And then Richard's going to share information about specific nutrients in the peer-reviewed literature. All this is from PubMed, that if you want to help prevent your body's immune system from being so vulnerable, you could go out and you could buy these things and have them as an emergency, your own health emergency kit, that you're not going to be ripped off by someone trying to profit off all this. It's just common sense, but these are the things you should have no matter what. You don't have to have a coronavirus to be prepared and try to make your immune system as strong as possible. Now over to Richard Gale. Richard?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me share a little bit about viruses in general and then the coronavirus specifically, and then I will jump into some of the research I've undertaken to look at where the science actually is showing for the targeting of respiratory diseases, infectious respiratory diseases. Viruses are very different than a bacterium, and I'm going to be very, very general with respect to this. If you were to look at under an electron microscope at a virus, you would be seeing something that's more shadowy. There's no cytoplasm in a virus, so there's no what we could think of as the life force, you could say, is compared to a living cell or a bacteria. A virus is really, in very simple words, is an RNA strand, which is the actual coding for the proteins, or one DNA strand. It does not, except for some of the very large viruses like a cytomegalovirus or herpes virus, which are very large viruses. But otherwise, viruses really cannot reproduce amongst themselves. They require a host cell in order to carry out that genetic coding for the proteins in order for a virus to reproduce. So a virus is really just a single strand of an RNA, which is the coronavirus is an RNA virus, or one strand of DNA. As you know, a DNA molecule has two strands. And then around that genetic coding is a protein casing. And that's what a virus basically is. So the coronavirus is associated with the upper respiratory tract and even gastrointestinal infections. We probably have all had a coronavirus infection sometime in our life, and very often small children. It's just a common cold. And most deaths that have been reported or being reported now seem to be associated with some secondary infection, most often pneumonia. There have been in the past very severe coronavirus strains, the famous Chinese SARS outbreak in 2003, and then the Middle East respiratory syndrome, sometimes called MERS, back in 2015, that killed thousands of people. But since coronaviruses in general are rarely deadly, except in these instances, as I just mentioned, with SARS and MERS, there has been very little research undertaken, both for diagnostics and treatment, because it's generally could just consider you're fighting a common cold. Unlike the flu, the international medical community, represented by the World Health Organization, doesn't really know that much about the coronavirus. However, right now we're learning much more about it. If you get a coronavirus, are you immune from it? As in many other viral infections, the body builds up an immunity over a period of time. There doesn't seem to be much evidence, even with a common cold, that due to a coronavirus, the immunity wanes very rapidly. What else we're also learning from China, in fact, China just put out a big report recently, a kind of a statistical analysis of the deaths that have been confirmed. We're finding that those who have had immune-compromised systems, like cardiovascular disease, hypertension, diabetes, chronic respiratory illnesses, this is where the highest rate of fatalities have been appearing. And we might remember that amongst Americans, it's estimated about 60% of American adults have at least one underlying health condition, and 40% have two or more. So, for example, 25 million Americans have diabetes, and that, of course, would lower your immunity. I do want to make one point clear, is that we are now seeing in the media doctors giving recommendations on what you can do to prevent coming down with the coronavirus infection, and they are recommending that you get a flu vaccine. So I can't say do or don't do that, but two studies really stand out. One was the Hong Kong study, probably the only double-blind placebo-controlled study I know of the flu vaccine, looking at a group of participants who took the shot and then those that just received a standard placebo saline solution. And that study showed, and they followed up the participants for 9 months, and there was approximately a 500% increase in the recipients of the flu vaccine getting non-flu respiratory infections. And in that study, it actually notes 4 different strains of the coronavirus. And then there was another study that just kind of came out to my attention, although it was conducted about 2 years ago, done by the Naval Medical Disease Surveillance, and they looked at the military personnel, whether they who received the flu. It's a standard thing in the military to receive the flu shot every year, and they looked to see what other non-respiratory conditions that the sailors were getting, and coronavirus was one of them. So it's just something to keep in mind. Let's see, what else can I be speaking? The Shanghai or Shenzhen Hospital at the China Medical University just put out a report last month, and it was published in the Journal of Medical Virology, and they were recommending that patients' nutritional status be evaluated before any conventional treatment. And the regimen that the Chinese hospital was recommending with vitamins A, B, C, D, omega, zinc, and IV gamma globulin A, that just kind of builds up your immune system. Something I used to take when I used to travel in Asia a lot, and going to India and Nepal when I lived there, I would just get a gamma globulin shot. It just kind of protects you from hepatitis. And then they were also recommending Chinese traditional medicine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through some of the botanicals first. And I can't say take it or don't take it. I am putting them in the order so as what I believe the science supports. So I'll speak about Astragalus first. So this is the one where I found the strongest research presented. So Astragalus appears to be probably the most promising of the botanical plants that can show some prevention for the cause of viruses. A study out of India at Manipal University found it was effective against coronavirus, adenovirus, rhinovirus, parainfluenza. These are all respiratory tract infections. So it seems to target respiratory tract infection viruses. There was a study at Jinlin Academy of Agricultural Sciences in China, published in Microbiology Pathology, and they quoted that Astragalus exhibits antiviral properties that can treat infectious bronchitis caused by coronavirus. That was in the conclusions of the study. Let's see, there has been, I've got so much here, and I'm not going to be able to go through everything, but we'll post this on the later when I kind of write it up, so it's more readable. I have this as notes at the moment. Just 2 weeks ago, Beijing University of Chinese Medicine completed a large review and analysis of all the previous research looking at the benefits of Chinese herbal formulas against the SARS coronavirus, as well as the flu virus, and they found that people taking Chinese formulas that had the Astragalus were the most effective. And then, what else we got here? Another interesting study that was done. Now, this was done at the my Chinese is getting weak here, Yunnan Academy of Agricultural Sciences in China. And they looked at the rates of infection across many of the different provinces, noticing that some provinces, even though they were right next to each other, that the rates of infection were dramatically different. And what they discovered was that the lowest rates of infection were where there was between 84 and 98% of the population was just taking traditional Chinese medicines. And again, the main ingredients they identified were astragalus, and in this study they also recognized it was ginseng as well. The second herb, this was a surprise to me. I did not expect to find this, but it's in licorice root. There is a compound, glycyrrhizin, and you find in all the medical literature of ancient India, China, and Greece even, that licorice has been used for sore throats, bronchitis, coughs, allergic diseases. It was a popular plant in traditional medicine. So Japan's National Institute of Infectious Disease, this happens to be the part of the Japanese Medical Health Ministry, reported that this glycerin's effectiveness against coronavirus and severe acute respiratory syndrome, meaning SARS, as well as Epstein-Barr virus. They observed that. There's actually, after the big SARS outbreak, there's been a lot of research going on in licorice. Biologists at Frankfurt University Medical School looked at several antiviral compounds that were for treating patients admitted with SARS coronavirus infections. And of all the compounds that were tested, the licorice was found to be the most effective. There was research done at Satyam University looking at different derivatives of licorice. It was there also they found it effective against the SARS coronavirus, and as well as herpes, HIV, and the flu. 2005, a large study at Goethe University in Germany, along with the Russian Academy of Sciences, had already identified the antiviral activity of this glycyrrhizic acid against the SARS coronavirus. They found that one conjugate of licorice had a 70-fold increase of protecting one from it. The next one I would recommend, or where the science seems to be strongest, is elderberry. And it's better if you, with elderberry, if you're buying elderberry, sometimes you'll see it sold as elderberry syrup, or you can find it sold as Sambucus. Sambucus, it's a little different because there's different strains of elderberry or species, and the Sambucus seems to have the greater potency against respiratory tract infections. Emory University in 2014 published a study. And interesting because Emory University is in Atlanta, Georgia, so it's very connected with the CDC. There's a lot of research shared between Emory University and the CDC. And it did show the elderberry extract inhibited coronavirus virility at the point of infection. So if you're taking elderberry and at the point of when a virus is going to infect a cell, that's at the point in which elderberry seemed to be most effective. The best study I found came out of the National Sun Yat-sen University and the China Medical University Hospital in Taiwan. And it used an ethanol extract of Sambucus stem, not the berry. They used the stem. That you would have to find as a tincture probably online. But it displayed the strongest potential against one of the coronavirus strains, not one of the more virulent ones. There's been studies, a lot of research coming out of Israel, Hadassah University and Hebrew University in Jerusalem, that have also been looking at the cytokine activity for elderberry that's directly related to coronavirus and flu strains. What else have we got here? We've got Sydney. I mentioned about the elderberry being very effective at the point of infection, meaning when the virus is making contact with the cell. That study was reproduced in 2019 by the University of Sydney, and they confirmed that same finding. Next plant I would look at is echinacea. Now, echinacea is kind of an odd one, and you have to be very careful about purchasing echinacea. You want to make sure that only the echinacea root is in your supplement. There seems to be no antiviral activity in the leaves or other parts of the plant. It's the root. what in fact is an antiviral. And when I mention this of a plant or something being antiviral, I mean it has a specific biomolecular effect on the virus itself. But there's other plants and botanicals which are building your immune system, not directed against the virus itself. And echinacea seems to be one of these. It did, with a big study at the University of British Columbia, found that all strains of human and avian flu, influenza flu viruses, including those strains that are resistant to current drugs like the Tamiflu, were very sensitive to standardized echinacea preparation. Another thing about purchasing echinacea, again, there's different kinds of echinacea. If you purchase echinacea, be certain that it's Echinacea purpurea, P-U-R-P-U-R-E-A, purpurea. That is the particular quality or particular echinacea that has the strongest medicinal properties. You'll find sometimes there'll be another other kinds that are used because they're cheaper for whatever reason. There's been a double-blind study out of the University of Griffith in Australia that looked at, it was a double-blind study, very interesting. This is for air travelers. They actually looked at where they were giving echinacea to people traveling when they're traveling in airplanes, and they found that those that were taking the echinacea later in follow-up had a much lower rate of any kind of respiratory symptoms after their flights. Oregano oil is another one. Now, oregano oil has a certain compound called carbachol, and it has been identified as being antiviral. The University of Arizona investigated oregano's antiviral properties, but it focused on a novovirus. Novovirus is another one of these respiratory infections, flu-like virus. And if you spray oregano oil is sprayed on a surface, it will kill the virus within 15 minutes of exposure. Another study that was conducted down in Brazil, Federal University of Santa Maria, found that it was effective against 5 different strains of human respiratory syncytial virus, RSV. It's another flu-like virus. There's been studies out of China, University of Oklahoma, showing oregano's ability to affect flu viruses. I'm scrolling down here. Olive leaf. So olive leaf has a compound, oleuropein, or OLE. It's the most important biomolecule in the olive. It contributes to, it has antioxidant properties, anti-inflammatory, even anti-cancer, and antiviral and antimicrobial. The nice thing about olive leaf is extract is that it's very bioavailable. It's something that gets into your system very readily. One problem with taking a lot of botanicals is that they get broken down, especially if our microbiome is very weak and we don't have a strong microbiome with a lot of beneficial bacteria. Then a lot of the these molecules who want to be able to pass the gut-blood barrier and really get circulated into our system gets limited. So the one thing about, that's also true of curcumin, turmeric, where it's a problem with its bioavailability. Olive leaf has been shown particularly against viral upper respiratory infections, and the coronavirus is an upper respiratory infection as opposed to a lower respiratory infection. It strengthens our immune system against infectious diseases, and it also has anti-inflammatory properties. Again, unfortunately, there's very few of these plants and botanicals have actually been studied looking specifically at a coronavirus. But for olive leaf, there was a study I found at the University of Auckland in New Zealand that looked at its olive leaf's ability to treat respiratory illnesses, including the coronavirus, and that was a randomized control study, and it came out with positive results. Colloidal silver and we're kind of moving outside of the botanicals now. But most studies for colloidal silver's antiviral properties are focused on HIV, hepatitis, or herpes. There's been nothing. It's never been tested against the coronavirus, but it's known it can kill most viruses in a very short period of time. Gary could speak more about taking colloidal silver. Scrolling down through here, colloidal silver is very, very effective, I would just say, against many different viruses. The University of Naples study did look at its ability to reduce viral infections from parainfluenza, paraflu. Some of these studies, I find, a very interesting point is that our body has, when a virus is going to attack a cell, the cell has certain proteases, and the virus will use those proteases for its infection. And what I found interesting was that the coronavirus and the flu virus will both utilize two of these same proteases of a cell. And what that would mean is that if there's a lot better research looking at the flu than there is a coronavirus, but if something is effective against the flu, more or less there will likely be some benefits against the coronavirus as well. One other plant I do want to mention, which has been studied specifically against the coronavirus, is a plant called Bupleurum, Bupleum, which has been studied specifically because of its anti-coronavirus properties. And this came out of Kaohsiung Medical University in Taiwan, where they examined many of the derivatives of this plant, specifically on coronavirus strains, and it found that it interfered with the early stages of virus replications. And Bupleurum can be purchased by Planetary Herbals, or Nature's Answer, so it is available. It's best to do as a tincture. And then, as far as supplements go, there's Gary mentioned vitamin C earlier. Vitamin C. The important thing of vitamin C is it really enters into the white blood cells, which is the body's immune defense, rather than just circulating around in the blood plasma. And that's why it has a lot of such powerful antioxidant properties. And at this very moment, China is conducting several clinical trials with intravenous vitamin C to treat patients with the coronavirus. The city of government of Shanghai has now started treating patients, and a trial is underway at Changnam Hospital in Wuhan using 24,000 milligrams per day of intravenous vitamin C to treat patients there. I have many different studies showing vitamin C's beneficial effects on the common cold and other respiratory diseases. Vitamin D. We should remember that a lot of these viral infections, respiratory infections, occur during the winter months, and that's when the vitamin D levels are at their lowest. We're not synthesizing much, we're not outside as much, we're indoors more. So most people tend to be vitamin D deficient during the winter season. But studies have shown that by increasing there's another studies have also shown that those who come down with flu infections more often than not will show a vitamin D deficiency. So boosting your system up with vitamin D is very, very important. Emory University has looked at vitamin D's ability to treat, to protect one from respiratory viruses, particularly flu. Japanese study at GK University Medical School, a randomized study, found that vitamin D could reduce seasonal influenza view. Vitamin A, you'll hear people recommending vitamin A, but I did not find that the research really supported it against flu-like or respiratory viruses. And then the last one I would mention is N-acetylcysteine. That's another surprise to me, but should have been, because oxidative stress is a very well-known pathway for microbial infections such as bacterial pneumonia and especially infections of the lung. So when the lungs are subject to serious oxidative stress, there is an increase in our body's own inflammatory cytokines. Cytokines are these inflammatory, our body produces them to fight inflammation, but at the same time there can be an overload. So each of these different cytokines, IL-1, IL-6, tumor necrosis factor, or TNF, they've been shown repeatedly in clinical research to play a role in many different respiratory infections, including coronavirus and many of these other flu-like viruses, echovirus, Coxsackie virus. Therefore, certain antioxidants have been shown to alleviate lung damage due to oxidative stress if you happen to get a respiratory infection. And this is where N-acetylcholine or cysteine, cysteine, is a very, very important antioxidant. The research was very good, especially out of Germany, and a lot of studies out of Italy that shows NAC's beneficial results for fighting respiratory infections, particularly the flu. So, Gary, that's what I've got to share there. And
all right, give them a little of your scientific background, your research background.
So I worked, I was 10 years. I was a senior research analyst in the biotech field with Chiron. We were a vaccine maker as well, and we were the company that discovered isolated, I should say, the hepatitis C virus. And then I worked with one of the early genetics companies when everybody was trying to find a gene for this or that. And so I did that for 10 years until, out of disgust, I decided, well, I'd be better just protesting in the streets of Seattle against the World Trade Organization. So I worked with Mikhail Gorbachev's foundation as they're heading up their public relations and communications.
And for the past nearly 13 years, he's been executive producer.
13 years.
Doing good work, and what I say at the beginning of every show is every single thing I'm saying at the first, generally 20 minutes of the show, is all coming from peer-reviewed literature and from quality institutions. And so Richards has spent all week looking at the peer-reviewed literature to show which nutrients you can take that can help build your natural immune system. We're not looking at the coronavirus now. We're looking at everything. I mean, that's why I say we have to gain quantum understanding. Just like if someone says, if the Chinese succeed with this 24,000 milligrams a day, which in my personal opinion, having been the first person in the United States to advocate for high-dose vitamin C in a medical setting, at two medical settings, both the Institute of Applied Biology, which was super orthodox, and the Tri-State Healing Center, which was all board-certified physicians and top nurses, nurse practitioners. Dr. Elmar Gadal, the holistic dentist, started there. Acupuncturists, chiropractors like Mitchell Proflin from out in Queens or Brooklyn. We had it all. And the one thing that we had were thousands and thousands of patients. And so the underlying almost every condition that came in the door was the status of their immune system. We found out the older they were, the more compromised their immune system, the more challenging it was to try to help them. And yet in spite of all that, by upping the amount of vitamin C, intravenous vitamin C, and doing regular blood workups through the main lab that everyone uses, Roche Labs, you could actually see the improvement in their immune system month to month. And with that understanding, we upped it to such a high level that I'm with all the conversations I did with Robert Geller and Stuart Berger and Robert Atkins and Warren Levin and Harold Rosenberg, all of the holistic doctors in the tri-state area, plus those around the United States, no one was even coming close to helping people with disease the way we were. And I believe that it was the homeopathic remedies, the psychological counseling, by Dr. Donald Mullen and others, the cleansing and detoxification, and the intravenous vitamin C in combination with glutathione pushes, etc., that made the difference. And that is a story that is yet to be told. But so when you learn that vitamin C helps, let's say, hypothetically with the coronavirus, if the Chinese find it out and publish the results or share it, and I believe they will, I believe what we'll see, this is my hypothesis, no proof yet, but if 24,000 milligrams of vitamin C is shown to benefit the people currently being used there as, in effect, as human guinea pigs, and if it works, then you'll see hundreds of thousands of people given vitamin C. I don't believe they'll ever be completely honest about the numbers, because I believe from the very beginning they have been understating the number of infected and understating the number dead. That's based upon other reports we've gotten back. But then you'll start to see that whole vitamin C going out further and further and further into the population. If anyone in the audience, and we are packed, that we don't have room for another person on the webinar, but if anyone has any contacts in China with medical doctors, we would be happy and free. I don't charge for any of this. Nothing that I'm doing is about this money or selling anything. Just to give them the experience of higher doses of vitamin C than what they're doing. They're starting where they think it's very high. It isn't. But it's certainly better than what a person would be taking orally, but not a whole lot more, because I know people who take 20,000 milligrams a day of vitamin C. Linus Pauling used to all the time. And he lived to his mid-90s. And he said to me, because he was a friend, he said, had I started early in life applying what I know now, then I could easily have lived past 100. And he came to this awareness of vitamin C and health later in life, much later. So let them know that we have physicians, board-certified physicians, and scientists who'll be happy to share that information with them so that they can have a more specific protocol, because we're the only ones in America that did it. No one had done it before us. There was one man in Reidsville, North Carolina, who did it, and he only did it at 50,000 milligrams and got remarkable results. I went down to visit him. He came to New York, and we went way above that. Dr. Robert Cathcart, associate with Stanford University, big-time physician out in San Francisco, came in, spent 2 weeks with us, all day. When I'd open up at 8 in the morning, he'd be there till midnight. He'd be there. And he had never, he said, in his entire medical career, he was in his 60s that time, seen results across the board with all kinds of illnesses, chronic fatigue syndrome, Lyme's disease, cancers, that we were getting, AIDS. So he went back and used our protocol, not as high and not as comprehensive, but still good. He said he never had a patient die from AIDS after that. So we are simply suggesting that the most important preventive measure you can do outside of using common sense techniques is to build up your immune system for any condition, all right? And just like the science that says, well, we only have a study on vitamin C and colorectal cancer, we're saying pull back and start looking at why wouldn't it help other cancers in the rest of the body. I mean, they're not willing to use common sense and reason, and as a result, they become overly emphatic, in my opinion. In any case, we're going to go to Dr. Roy Spicer in a moment, but I realize that probably 300 or 400 people did not get on at noon with the new clock set forward today with the new time, and hence have missed the first hour. Well, here's the good news. Our Glenn is going to be sending everyone a link so you can download this and have it for yourself. So you can listen to this as often as you wish. So anything you didn't write down, you'll be able to go through, stop it, and write it down. Also, for those who missed the first hour, now you'll be able to get all that information so you will miss nothing. I will go over a few things for everyone to make it a little clearer. And I'm going to give you an example. Let's say that you've got to fly. Right now, the airports are pretty empty. In fact, there are flights, so they don't lose their flight routes, and they're flying almost empty planes. So if there's a time to fly, now's it. But what do you do to protect yourself? The first thing I do is I build up my immune system. On the day of the flight, I take extra vitamin C in the morning, but I also make sure I take zinc. Zinc is a very important nutrient for your immune system. And then I hydrate fully, because flying is not healthy to fly under any circumstances because of the radiation, background radiation you're exposed to, and that nobody ever talks about. But when I got on the plane, and I've been doing this for years, I do it as discreetly as possible. I don't draw any attention to myself. You can't take more than 3 ounces of liquid on. So what I do is I have a couple little bottles of isopropyl rubbing alcohol. Simple, right? And then I get some clean tissues, and I wipe down the belt that you put around you. You forget. Yeah, everyone's touched that belt, and I don't know if they ever clean the damn belt. And but you clean, and the cleaning should be for 60 seconds. First you spray, let it sit, then rub it. And you should wash your hands for at least 60 seconds with soap. And then I take my seat pad, and you can buy these right over the internet. They're very inexpensive. It's just that little back and seat. You fold it up. It weighs a couple ounces. You can carry it anywhere. And so I put it down so that way my back and my seats are fine. And then I always wear old clothes on a plane. I never wear something new, because no matter what. I mean, look, did you imagine all the times that people take their shoes off and they're barefoot and they're walking around an airport like somehow you're not picking up every virus in the world, right? And then they put their shoes back on or their socks as if that's okay. Well, I always take an extra pair of socks with me, just running socks. So when I'm in line and they say, take your shoes off there, I simply take the shoes off and I put the socks on, so my socks are always clean. I then take whatever I have that has to be out of my pockets, and I put them before I get in line. I put all that into one of those little sandwich bags, little plastic sandwich bags, because that carrier that you're putting your laptop and everything in, it's very contaminated. When I say very contaminated, it's really bad. I mean, it's as bad as licking a toilet seat. So everyone's touched that. You got every germ in the world on there, so don't touch it. That's where you want simple plastic gloves. All right. Again, nobody notices it. You put them on. You put everything you need in there, and that's why I wear old stuff. Go through, and I never go through the one where they put your hands over your head and say, oh, this is non-ionizing radiation. That's nonsense. I say I'd rather have a pat down, and they take a few minutes and give me a pat down. It's fine. Then you put back on the clothes. But remember now, when you go sitting down anywhere in an airport, if you're not using that seat, your pants, your shirt are contaminated. And again, people think, well, what's the big deal? You know, I'm not going to be germophobic. I'm not asking you to be germophobic. I'm asking you to be smart. So, again, use that pad on the plane. Wipe down the headrest. That way, when you lean your head back, your hair and your neck are not going to be contaminated. Because what do you think people do frequently to get up out of a seat? They hold the seat in front of them, up at the top. In which case, then, you got people's hands. They've been coughing, sneezing, picking their nose. Who else knows where they put the finger? And now it's on the back of your, and you're leaning back against, and now it's on you. You rub your hair, you touch your head. Now it's on your hands, you touch your face. it's so easy to pick up these microorganisms that you shouldn't have in your body. I also then do the following. I wear a mask. The mask I wear is, and you can get them yourself. You have to be a little patient, and you should always have a bunch of these at home. I would suggest buy 10 up. They're not expensive. Not expensive at all. But it seals, it comes tight on the cheeks because that's where a lot of the contaminated air comes through. And I spray the inside of the mask with colloidal silver. I spray the outside of the mask with colloidal silver because I don't know a single thing that I feel is more protective for me than colloidal silver. It's phenomenal at 500 parts per million. I spray it in my mouth every 2 hours on a flight and in my nose. Colloidal silver, 500 parts per million. And there's a gazillion of them out there. Then I'm not touching my eyes. You know, my hands are clean. My body's fine. And I'll bet all of you have flown where someone in the plane was coughing and not covering their mouth. Just remember, that plane is like a petri dish. It doesn't have the highest quality air filtration system, and you're going to be exposed. Whether you're exposed and have a strong immune system, in which case your body will fight it, kill the antigens, create an antibody, and you're fine. Or whether you're tired, weak, not enough sleep, you've got a disease of some kind, or you're older, your immune system's not compromised, and now you get off that plane and the next day you're in bed sick. Why do you think school kids come home sick and within 24 hours the whole family is sick? And this always is amazing to me because if you know that a kid is sick, you put a mask on the kid and you put a mask on everyone else in the family. You take every single thing in the house that anyone's going to touch and you alcohol it with a clean paper towel. You put everyone's toothbrush in their own cup and put hydrogen peroxide in the cup. The toothbrush goes upside down to the head. Why? Because that person who is sick, when they're going to brush their teeth, they're going to recontaminate from the toothbrush their body. And hence we have a lot of rebound infections in the country. And this way you don't have that. You have mandatory seat down, then flush. Because when a person leaves the seat up and they flush the toilet, it's like the toilet sneezed into the air. Hundreds of thousands of bacteria, tens of thousands of viruses are everywhere. That means that viruses and bacteria are on your soap, on the handles of everything, on towels that you're going to wipe your face with. So it's just common sense. Use only paper plates and disposables, and there are disposables that are biodegradable, so that's fine. And have all their food separate from anyone else. That way they're not cross-contaminating. Otherwise, we've heard this story so often, it's become urban legend. That one person's sick, everybody gets sick. But the person who's less likely to get sick is the person whose immune system is strong and using common sense. I'm sure we must have some school teachers on the line right now. I've been teaching for a long time. College of New Rochelle and the New School and Pratt and other places. Fairleigh Dickinson University. And I would go in and I would alcohol every single desk, the blackboard, eraser, the chalk, everything. My desk, though I never sit at a desk in college, I'm always standing and lecturing. But at least no one was going to cross-contaminate in there during that class. Now, I was the only class I knew that did that, and everyone else thought it was eccentric and a joke. But guess who didn't come down with any illnesses? So teachers, in between classes, educate the students about proper public health hygiene to where they can have a bottle. You can get a big bottle or two or three so that they spray their desks under, top, above, their pens, everything they touch, so at least they're not spreading that. And if they should look like they're sick or something, send them home. You know, if they're okay but don't, let them wear a mask. That's fine. Also, another big issue, then we're going to go to Roy, is how you shop. Now, I'm going to give you an example of this because I wanted to see how people were shopping, so I went to 3 different stores. A big store, Costco, a big store with not as many customers, Whole Foods, and a small store, a small health food store. Costco's actually had someone at the front door give me one of those antibacterial wipes. I didn't see anybody cleaning the bar or the carriage, the little carriage they use to put all their shop goods in. They did wipe their hands. Not that that's going to do any good if everything you're going to touch had to be put up on a shelf or display for you to purchase with human hands. And then the cells you cannot assume are hygienic. So when you buy anything in a store, first thing you do when you go into a store, always take some wet, alcohol wet, paper towels to cover the bar where your hands are going to be. So when you're pushing your cart, shopping cart through a store, you're not contaminated by the cart. Then, whatever you buy, boxed, canned, frozen, or produce fresh, that's fine. At the checkout, remember, your checkout person is handling everyone's food and everyone's money. And they're not putting gloves on when they handle food and taking it off when or putting it on when they're handling money and take it off when they're handling. No, they're just handling it. So you got to figure that everything that you bought in any store is loaded with other people's bacteria and viruses. Well, what if someone has a virus? What if they have herpes? And by the way, contrary to myth, and really stupid and vile myth that we spread in a society, you can get a lot of viruses from vaccines, including herpes, eating in a restaurant where the silverware or water glass hasn't been sterilized. Yeah. Viruses and bacteria, depending upon their type, can live for hours to weeks on surface areas. And think of how dirty most, not all, but most restaurants are to begin with. It's just like I sat down in this macrobiotic restaurant not long ago, and the person came over and they took away the dishes, fine. Then they had a wet cloth that they were wearing, and they took that and wiped down the table. But I watched this person, they were using the same cloth to wipe down every table. That meant that everyone that was in there, they had water beads from normal breathing on that table. So all they did is just smear it around. And again, you can get an apple, wipe it across your pants or shirt. You haven't done a thing to clean it. You've just smeared whatever's on there, whether it's a mold or a yeast or a bacteria virus, you just smeared it around. You got to wash them. What is the best thing to wash with? Well, there are multiple products called veggie washes. But by and large, you can make your own and save some money. Apple cider vinegar is one of the best things you can use. Generally 3 to 1. 3 times water to 1 apple cider vinegar, and agitate, agitate, rinse, agitate, agitate, rinse, agitate, agitate, rinse 3 times, then it's clean, or at least as clean as we can reasonably get it. So now you know what to do on an airplane, and oh, brother, when you go into a toilet, make sure that you have some form of protection on around your face, because that's going to be filled with bacteria and viruses. And use paper towels to touch anything and everything. If you put the toilet seat up or down, paper towel. Put paper towels around the toilet seat itself. You don't want to be sitting on that. It's going to be contaminated. Never drink the water on an airplane, by the way. You don't know whether or not it's sterile or not. Best to buy water inside the terminal and then take that on the plane with you. Never allow someone to put ice cubes into a cold drink, because you don't know the source of the water, and it was shown in multiple studies that ice cubes are very contaminated. never, ever, under any circumstances, in any restaurant or bar, have any of the orange, lemon, lime peels, because you can bet those are contaminated. Don't. Mind you, the person that's handling all the glasses, you stick your finger in a glass to pick it up, all the saliva is in there, and now it's on your hands. Now you touch an orange or a lemon, you're not going to wash it, you're going to cut it, the knife you're cutting is contaminated. It's all contaminated. And you can say, well, Gary, it's not a big deal, all right? Not a big deal. Just like the woman who recently, just last week when I was at a farmer's market, and there was some beautiful displays of fruits, and she was eating a couple of the cherries, just picking them and eating them. And I just said, ma'am, are you aware how many hands touched that cherry? And she turned to me and she said, I don't care. I don't care. Okay, fine. If a person is that cavalier, imagine how many other things in life they don't care about. But let me tell you the real facts on this. I'm going to give you a few figures now. 40 million people in the United States are food insecure, meaning they're malnourished. Their immune systems are going to be bad. 40 million. A minimum of 12 million, but I've seen a figure of almost 17 million children are malnourished because they lack food security, and almost a million children are very malnourished. They're very susceptible. And in fact, back during the Bush administration, we found that 85% of Americans lacked essential vitamins. Now, we had 1 in 6 Americans will get some form of food poisoning this year. 48 million got it last year. 3,000 died from it. 63 million people in the United States are drinking unsafe water. 63 million. Now, what if you're drinking unsafe water and you've got food poisoning? So, think of all the people, 48 million, 3,000 dead. That's more people died of food poisoning in the United States than will ever die from coronavirus in the United States or from North and South America all combined. Yet that's not on anyone's radar. No one's talking about it. No one's talking about how to prevent food poisoning. Well, I've just given you a whole primer of an hour and a half of how to prevent food poisoning, of how it happened to my own family members when we were down in Brazil. But a year later, when we went back on a different trip to see how aloe vera is actually grown, and we were in the Dominican Republic, and a friend of mine lives down there, a doctor, and in the capital. And so he wanted to take us out to dinner. And I said, fine. So a bunch of 6 of us all went to this famous restaurant he was bragging about. And I said, do they serve some vegetables and foods and cassava or other things? Oh, yeah. They'll do anything. It was a beautiful restaurant. Indeed it was. It was packed. So I said, excuse me. So I just got up. They thought I was going to the restroom. No, I went back to look in the kitchen. I've never eaten in a restaurant that I can't see in the kitchen. Well, first thing I saw was all the refrigerator door was open because there had been a blackout that day, as is common in the Dominican Republic and many other places. So I go in, and there's a guy back there cooking, and he's cooking fish off a table, and the fish had been out there. And there were flies back there. The place stunk. And there was a wash bucket, big dirty wash bucket, on a stool right beside where the vegetables were. And I said, oh, problem with the electric? Oh, yeah, every day. How many hours a day is the electric off? Oh, sometimes 4, 5, 6 hours a day. Okay. Well, that's food poisoning. It's not, are you going to get food poisoning? It's cross-contamination also, because there was only one tabletop where the fish and the beef and the pork and the chicken were all warm. That's where they were making salads. So I went back and I said, fellas, let's not eat here. The electricity was off today, And I just visited the kitchen, and I would not eat anything in here. Oh, that's nonsense. You know, this is Morty, my friend, the doctor, saying, I eat here all the time. And I said, that's fine, but I don't want to put my friends, my brother, at risk. And I said, I'll tell you what, let's go to a farmer's market. I saw one a couple blocks from here. We'll buy everything, and we'll go to a restaurant, and I'll pay them to let me make a meal so that it'll be safe and healthy and tasty, because I'm a gourmet chef. They didn't want to do that. Okay. So I just enjoyed the conversation, and they all got food poisoning the next day. Yeah, for 10 days this time. 10 days. And they lost weight, and they looked kind of orange and yellow. And I said, what is the magic number, Howard? What number? What is the number of times you have to do something wrong in order to realize maybe you ought to change? Well, of course, because he was my brother, he felt like ripping my head off. but I just had to tell him that because, he was just acting stupid. Now, yes, we're both from West Virginia, but that's no reason. So remember, look in a kitchen before you order anything in that restaurant. If they won't allow me to look in the kitchen, just to look in the kitchen, I'm not going to eat in that restaurant because I have owned 3 restaurants. And I know how strict my standards were. And I don't know if anyone else has my standards. Isn't it interesting? Think back over the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years, more. I've been on radio. I've been saying the same thing about hygiene, and people just, oh, that's crazy. Now, my advice on hygiene, Gary was right all along about this, yeah? And the problem is how many people died who didn't have to because they thought eating something that's organic, you didn't have to wash it, or not caring about, looking at where something comes from. Now, here's another point we have to realize. In America, we have 70 million obese people. 99 million are overweight. That's 169 million Americans, over half the population, are sick. 18% of all kids 6 to 11 years old are obese. Diabetes, 33 million Americans diagnosed with it, and 84 million pre-diabetic. Well, if you add 33 and 84, you're already up to 127 million diabetics. Heart disease, 121 million Americans. That's 48% of all adults, and 647,000 die from cardiac conditions every year. Cancer, 1.7 million diagnoses every year, 607,000 die annually. Dementia and Alzheimer's, 5.8 million. So none of these are registering on anything that's important. No epidemics, no pandemics, no concern, no changes, no advice to the public, no guidelines, nothing. As if these are all normal. They're not. 11,300 babies died every year in the United States on the day of their birth. That's a national disgrace. In fact, the United States, with all of its best obstetricians and gynecologists and pediatricians and hospitals and C-section emergency rooms, all this, we're ranked number 68th in infant mortality. That means 67 other countries a child has a chance of being born and living than rather in the United States. We have 1.5 million public school children who are homeless. And we have 1 in 285 American children with cancer, 19 years and younger, will be diagnosed with cancer. That's 15,800 kids a year. And think of all the refugees in the world. Think of how many are old and how many are young. They're the most susceptible to these infections. So when you look at these numbers, and these are real numbers, the government's own numbers, you ask yourself, gee whiz, if we can't get any of this right, then what are we learning about the coronavirus? Well, we're learning, the good news is we're learning that we're vulnerable where we didn't think we were, and people have to possibly, for the first time in their exact life, use some common sense. because we seem to be really lacking the desire to make any reasonable choice that would challenge our comforts. People still going on cruise ships, boy, that would be the last place I'd be going. Because under normal circumstances, you hear about viruses sweeping through cruise ships and people getting sick. Cafeterias, I would stay away from them. Public places, at least for this time being, I would stay away from public events at this time. I believe that with the emphasis and the precautionary measures, which are good, that people will be less likely to get infected. And if you take the advice we've given up to this point about your immune system, you'll be far more likely to withstand anything that actually happens to you. It was interesting because back at the Institute of Applied Biology, when they were working with people with AIDS, and every one of them was dying over a 2-year period, and then the director called me and said, I understand that you're helping people with AIDS and none of them are dying. So we haven't had a single patient die, and we have 1,200 of them. And we've had a lot reverse their conditions. He said, well, could you do that here? And I said, sure. So they took some of their medical staff and nurses, and we set up a IV drip room, and we did all the other botanicals and nutrients, and I took them all through the protocols. They never had another patient die, and they had 10 reversals over there over the next 3 years. But in that period of time, I saw so many of the staff sickened, people who were clearly shouldn't have been at work. They had the cold or flu and spreading it. And 2 days later, from one person to half the office would be out, the institute workers, scientists. Now, mind you, these are scientists. These are people who will know to put on special outfits when they're working with viruses or bacteria, and yet sit around there eating garbage, and it was garbage. I watched what they ate. They thought I was a strange bird that was a vegan, that they didn't know what the hell that represented, but it certainly wasn't anything they were going to accept. And here they're smoking, drinking, hacking away, phlegm all over the place, and getting sick and dying at a relatively young age. I saw one after the other die. But there's always someone to take their place and learning new lessons. So at what point do we realize maybe it's not the right time to be going into a concert or into, basketball or March Madness? If you're going to go to a movie theater, use the same thing that I do on an airplane, I do in the movie theater. Now, people might see me putting down some paper towels and wiping all that out, and they think, well, that's a strange guy. Okay, think me strange, but at least I know that my own bacteria is what I'm going to leave the theater with, no one else's. And I'm not going to have everyone else's feces on my pants that I'm going to go home and sit on and smear all over the place and then wonder why I've got some particular condition I didn't know I would be susceptible to. I'm going to wash all my food. Even frozen food I will wash, because I don't know how accurate or how thorough those assembly line conveyor belt washing machines are when it comes to cleaning everything. I'm very concerned about that, so I'll just wash stuff. No big deal. Again, nothing I've said is a big deal. It is all reasonable if you stick with it. Is it reasonable to say you want your body to be healthy, or do you say, I don't care? In which case, if you don't care, you really better hope that you don't come into contact with any of the microorganisms, just like two of my buddies who thought they were really smart. I had two lifelong New York buddies from Brooklyn who went to Dominican Republic, and about the 8th day when you see them curl up in little fetal positions and acting like they're 2 years old, wanting their mommy, all that toughness, all that bravado, all that machismo is just illusion. A tiny little microorganism so small they couldn't see it with the naked eye took a 220-pound guy filled with muscles and brought him down. That's what we have to understand. So what you intentionally stay ignorant of, you are automatically intentionally vulnerable to. Now, that said, I have more to share with you, but we're going to go over to Dr. Roy Spicer. He will introduce you, give you some of his scientific background, And why is Dr. Spicer on? Because I don't want to see anyone exploiting this to their advantage. As I told you at the beginning of this webinar, I have nothing to sell you. There's nothing to buy. I'm providing free advice to everyone of how you can stay healthier under all conditions, how to travel anywhere, and be conscious of where you travel and what you're eating or drinking, and how to take care of yourself, not just because of the coronavirus, for any virus, for any illness. I don't want to see you have heart disease, cancer, asthma, dementia. That's what I do every day in my life, every single day, counseling people to try to help them. And I've never charged a single person my entire 53 years of counseling people a penny. So it's not about motivating, but there are going to be people out there. I saw today that a jar of that antibacterial soap Perel was going for $60 some. Now you're going to get the ripoffs or people promising you cures. Don't believe them. All right? For what they're doing, they don't have the science to back them up, nor the clinical experience, nor the clinical studies. So Roy's here to give you some advice in that area. Roy, over to you.
Yes, hi, Gary, and hello, everyone. Gary covered a huge amount of information that's very valuable, probably the most comprehensive information on protecting yourself from all kinds of germs. My original first job was working for the Department of Health. I was a microbiologist and a biochemist. So I worked for the Department of Health in New Jersey in the enteric area. Enterics were intestinal bacteria and viruses. And what I learned is that when you travel, and Gary said it very explicitly, you're exposing yourself to high-risk environments. Airplanes are high-risk environments. After I studied and did research and actually testing of people that came back from foreign countries, and also I spent 5 years in the Air Force and the medics, and we saw our soldiers coming back from Vietnam. People would come back with these very exotic bugs. It wasn't just viruses and bacteria, but it was parasites and other organisms. So you always thought of traveling overseas as one of the problematic situations where you could be exposed to very exotic bugs. But over the period of 30, 40, 50 years, people who have come into our country from a lot of these other countries who have these endemic infections have brought them into our country. And recently, let's say in the last several years, one of them being Zika, which started in Brazil. It's not normal to have that in the United States. We've never seen it before, but it was brought into Miami by people from South America. The local mosquitoes bit them, and it started spreading, and it was transmitted. Now it's almost ubiquitous all over the place. Everybody that has been exposed to a mosquito bite has the potential for having possibly West Nile or Zika or chikungunya. These are all exotic diseases that we haven't seen in the United States 50 years ago. So as Gary mentioned, you should be germ conscious. I'm very germ conscious. I mean, you can call me a germophobic, but I've been that way since I worked for the Department of Health, seeing all these exotic bugs being transported into people from after they travel to foreign countries. So we used to call them travelers. The first one I encountered was somebody who went down to Mexico, ate fruits and vegetables uncooked, and we looked at their blood and their urine and their body fluids, and we found this huge, I saw it first, huge organism. I didn't know what it was. It was like a big worm. It was huge. So I called the supervisor over at the lab, and they looked in the microscope, and they said, that's a traveler. So I said, what's a traveler? I said, well, I'll show you a film. So they showed me this film about Mexicans and how they grow fruits and vegetables. They call it night soil. They use night soil, which is human waste. That's what they use, not animal manure, but human manure. And they have certain bugs in them that they've had for decades, years, centuries, and it's transmitted into the food. So a lot of people who travel, and now here in the United States, we have a lot of people working in restaurants, as Gary said, and one of the first things you see when you go in the bathroom is wash your hands. All employees must wash hands. It's basic. But do they really wash their hands? No. Because I used to go into restaurants as part of my job in the Department of Health and do finger cultures. So you take all the people that work in the restaurants, and you do a culture on agar. You put it in the incubator for a couple of days, and the expression was, if you see a green sheen, your hands aren't clean. So the healthcare workers didn't wipe themselves and had E. coli on their fingers, and they were touching hamburgers. They were actually sticking their hands in the meat, stirring it around, handling all the food, and they would transmit E. coli to patrons. That's where these outbreaks of food poisoning you hear about periodically happen. You also hear we've had outbreaks with lettuce and certain vegetables and fruits that are handled by people from Mexico and other places. You have warnings. They have outbreaks of gastrointestinal illness, E. coli. It's happened over the years. So you really have to be understanding that we're in a risk environment, and it depends on where you go. It could be a low risk, it could be a medium risk, it could be a high risk, or very high risk. Now, today I got a call from a friend who's visiting another friend of mine who got MRSA in a hospital. He was getting chemotherapy. His port got contaminated, got MRSA. He acquired this infection, got in his hip, and now he's in a hospital in antibiotics. And my other friend visited him, and outside the door they had these big yellow warning signs. He had to put a gown on and a hat, but they didn't give him a mask, and they didn't give him booties. So now he went home, called me up and said, well, am I at risk for acquiring an infection? So I said, well, where were your shoes? Well, I brought them in the house. I said, well, that's bad. Take them outside, spray them with Lysol, and leave them out there, and don't wear them in the house. What about your clothes? Well, I took them off, and I'm wearing them in the house. You have to bag them. You have to go a few steps further. Gary mentioned this in very elaborate detail, and that all the things that Gary mentioned are absolutely correct. You have to concern yourself about every single detail. Now, hospitals are very high-risk environments, and healthcare workers who are exposed to people with respiratory infections, they sometimes have to put on hazmat suits, literally Tyvek suits, goggles, shoe covers, gloves. There's protocols for that. That's a high-risk environment. So when you go into an infection control room, a negative pressure room, they have to have all this protective equipment on. That's a high-risk environment. Then when they come out of the room, they have to have two people de-gown and red bag all this protective equipment. It's all contaminated. Now, you don't want to be going into hospitals unless you absolutely have to. Hospitals are the worst place to be at any time, especially now with all these respiratory infections floating around. I was personally involved with infection control equipment during the SARS epidemic. There's 3 hospitals up in Canada. I was working with a company in Connecticut that was manufacturing negative pressure isolation room, portable units. So they had to ship them up to the hospitals, and they had to cordon off the hospital outside. They had to drop the equipment off, and people from the hospital had to come out. You couldn't go into the hospital area. Now, the SARS infection, from what I was reading, was what's called a zoonotic transmission. In China, people on farms literally live with their animals. And you have these viruses transported around between animals, pigs, ducks, chickens, and they float around. And a lot of people, if you've seen the World Health Organization, go into some of these really rural areas of China, Vietnam, Cambodia. Literally, they're killing the chickens right in the front door of these huts, and there's blood splattered all over the place. And they're literally sleeping with their animals. So the animals have a pool of these viruses floating around. It's been going on for decades, and these viruses mutate. And what zoonotic transmission means, it finally mutates to the point where it can be transmitted from an animal to a human. That's a big leap. It's a big leap in mutation. So the SARS virus, from what I was reading, reported by the World Health Organization, there's a market in Guangdong. It's another area of China where there's a lot of electronic companies. People come from all over the world to go to these companies. And the marketplace, have animals coming in. Some of them are exotic animals like the civet cat, because in the Chinese culture, they eat these animals during certain times of the year. And apparently the civet cat was in the marketplace, and they were cleaning the cages and with hoses, and they aerosoled the SARS virus. A doctor was walking by, or several people. They were exposed to these aerosol SARS viruses, and this one doctor went back to Canada, worked in a hospital, and it started spreading. And it spread into 3 hospitals. But it was contained. SARS virus was another form of the coronavirus, different mutation. So the coronaviruses have been around. There's a lot of viruses that have been around. Flu virus. We've been through a lot of, not epidemics, but influenza season. Then you had the bird flu situation. So the United States government has been preparing for these epidemics with certain devices that they give to the public and also to businesses and critical infrastructure. So Gary covered, what you can do on an individual level very thoroughly, and to avoid risk, you don't want to go into high-risk situations. Now, for example, people that are high risk are doctors, nurses, dentists. So if you have an elective procedure being done, you may want to reconsider going into a hospital right now and have an elective procedure, because that's a high-risk environment. If you have to go see a doctor for an annual visit and it's nothing urgent, you may want to reconsider that, because doctors' offices are germ farms, just like hospitals. Going to a dental office is really bad, because you're aerosoling, you're in people's mouths, the dentist in your mouth, and mouths are very dirty places, have a lot of germs, and they're aerosoling these germs all over the dental office, and you're exposed to that if you go into a dental office. To potential aerosol germs, especially now where, if this virus spreads, it may create a higher risk. So I would avoid any medical procedures or offices, being in any office if you don't have to. It's elective. And wait till this thing really goes away, which it could be months, could be longer. It's hard to say. So avoiding high-risk situations. What's a medium-risk situation? Well, Gary mentioned also going to big events where you have a lot of people around. As a matter of fact, I just had an email that a lot of Catholic churches now have changed their procedure. They're not shaking hands. They're not recommending that their worshipers hug people. And they're just giving high fives and the V sign. So they want to avoid transmission of viruses in closed situations, closed quarter situations, and any personal contact. So that's just normal things that we should be doing anyway. But now with the risk of spreading infections, you don't want to have close contact with anyone. You don't want to touch hands. You don't want to shake hands. Just give like Gary mentioned, to say, hi, nice to see you. One of the things, I just got an email from a doctor who's, her name is Juliana Grant. She's an MD and a MPH, public health and epidemiology expert. And she has 17 years experience in the CDC. She graduated from the CDC's Epidemic Intelligence Service, and she had some very good suggestions that were covered already, but I just want to reiterate some of them. So the first thing is stay calm and take it seriously. A lot of people are panicking right now. They don't know what to do. They're running out and cleaning shelves off of toilet paper. How's that going to stop an infection? Now, I understand people want to prepare, but this is not the zombie apocalypse. So you can't panic. Now, if you're sick, as Gary mentioned again, you should stay home. If you have a respiratory infection, you don't know you were in contact with somebody, then you should get tested for the coronavirus. They're going to be having test kits available to everyone, the hospitals, doctors. That should be available soon. So test yourself. Now, other things that you can use, other strategies, aside from minimizing exposure and washing your hands. The EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, this past week, on March 3rd, has a publication, and I will send this along to Gary, can put it up on his website. This is a list of EPA's registered antimicrobial products for use against novel coronavirus SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19. So what they're doing here, they're publishing a list of qualified disinfectants to use for protection against the coronavirus. Okay, this is a publication that was on March 3rd of 2020. And I will give you the list. I'll mention a few of them, but they're saying right here, and this is from the EPA Administrator Andrew Wheeler. He said, using the right disinfectant is a huge part of preventing and reducing the spread of the illness. Now, again, there's two ways of spreading illnesses or acquiring an illness, is touching surfaces or objects that have the virus on it, and then touching your own mouth, nose, possibly your eyes. But this is not the only way the virus can spread. That's what it's saying right here. The virus is also believed to be spread by people in close contact with each other through respiratory droplets produced when a person infected with the virus coughs or sneezes. That's according to the CDC website. So the list of disinfectants that they're recommending that are qualified against the coronavirus are as follows. I'll just read a few of them, and then I'll give this to Gary to put up on his website. So first is Clorox Healthcare Bleach Germicidal Cleaner Spray. That's Clorox Healthcare Bleach Germicidal Cleaner Spray. There's a number of Clorox products, including Clorox Disinfectant Wipes. Then they have another one by Lysol Disinfectant Max Cover Mist, and Professional Lysol Disinfectant Spray. So that's on the list. Also, there's Perel Professional Surface Disinfectant Wipes and Sani Prime Germicidal Spray. So there's a whole list of them. There's many more on the list, but a lot of them are for professional use in healthcare settings. But these are the ones that should be available in supermarkets or online. And, as Gary mentioned, you use alcohol is very effective. You should have alcohol swabs and disinfectant soap. Regular soap, I think, is just as effective, and if it's used for 60 seconds, as Gary mentioned, you have to have that contact. So any surfaces that you come in contact, you should try not to touch doorknobs. We know all these things in the past. Going to public bathrooms is a high-risk environment, and by avoiding high-risk environments, you're better off, and then use appropriate sanitizing procedures and cleaning general hygienic procedures. Changing a lifestyle is also recommended by Dr. Grant. Now, how do we change our lifestyle? Well, first, shopping. And Gary mentioned a few things about shopping. Well, if you have to shop, if you have to get food, you should only shop for 2 weeks, once every 2 weeks. Take enough groceries or consider you have your groceries delivered. But here's my concern. A lot of people get deliveries from Amazon. And once this virus starts spreading and people are touching the boxes, and this was a concern with other situations where there was a general spread of bacteria, you're going to have to be careful handling the box because you have a lot of people touching the box. You have people putting the products in the box. So you're going to need to either put latex gloves on or use something that you disinfect the box first before you open it, and disinfect the products that are in the box so you don't have any exposure to potential bacterial viruses, not just under normal circumstances. Because I don't know how many people are handling things. There's other common things. First of all, I don't go to too many restaurants, and I'm very careful about what I touch in restaurants. First thing is the biggest source of contamination is menus. This has been studied. How many people are handling the menus? Hundreds, thousands. So menus are just loaded with germs. Another thing, and I've done this for years, when you go pump gas, I don't touch gas pumps. I put gloves on. I have latex gloves. I have a lot of boxes of latex gloves. So I put latex gloves on before I pump gas. And then there's a procedure for removing the gloves. And this, if you're going to use latex gloves, the way you do it is you pinch the edge of the glove around your wrist on one hand, pull it down, reverse the position inside out, then take that inside out glove and grab the other glove with the inside out part of the glove and pull it down, and don't touch the other glove. That's medical procedure. So again, if you're going to use a latex glove, if you have to pump gas, for example, put them on. When you take them off, use one hand to peel the glove down on one hand, inside out, reverse direction. Then grab that inside out glove and use it to remove the other glove without touching the outside of either glove. So those are just very basic procedures. So touching surfaces that have been touched by hundreds of people, thousands of people, is not a good idea. That's a high-risk situation, so avoid that. The other thing is, at some point, we may have to work from home if possible. So if you're in a job where you're in contact with a lot of people, you may not be able to do that. In some situations, you can work from home. I'm working at home right now, remoting into my business, and it's very effective for me. Also, I don't travel a lot anymore. The last time I went on a plane was a year ago, and I've been in traveling avoidance for a number of reasons. Planes are basically high-risk environments. Gary went through that very graphically, and if you have to go on a plane, if it's absolutely necessary, use all the precautions he just discussed. I consider the bathrooms on planes radioactive. They're just treated like they're radioactive. You don't even want to go to the bathroom. Also, they did a study recently. They found that the best position in a plane to get the least exposure to germs is at a window seat. Not that that's going to help you tremendously, but it just reduces your exposure because the aisle seats, people going back and forth, transmitting germs. They've had a couple outbreaks on planes recently and in the past. I don't travel on boats. I've never gone on a cruise ship because of working in the Department of Health. I knew those are closed environments. They have the rotavirus outbreaks periodically. Norovirus is another gastrointestinal virus. People on there are touching surfaces, food handlers, high-risk environment. So you want to avoid any high-risk environment. Reduce your trips if possible. And I think it's just going to be something you have to look at forward, that these are lifestyle changes that just become part of your daily routine. That's what you have to do. You have to realize that this is going to be a situation. We don't know how long it's going to go on. It could be a couple of months. It could last longer. But you have to incorporate all these procedures and strategies to protect yourself. You know, the immune system boosting, that's certainly one prong of it. Avoidance of high-risk environments. And then this thing with personal protection equipment. Now, let's go through that for a minute. So we discussed the hand sanitizers, the disinfectant soap, gloves. Then there's other things. Now, everybody's running out and buying respiratory masks. So how does that work? Well, you see in Asia, everybody's been wearing masks. I've been involved with reviewing masks and looking at them for quite a few years. Most of the masks really don't protect you that well. And CDC and the government are not recommending you get them because they want it for the healthcare workers. Years ago, they had a procurement, the government had a procurement for 100 million masks. Currently, they have a procurement for 500 million masks. So there's a shortage for healthcare workers. And I know this because I speak to people in hospitals all the time. Healthcare workers, they don't have enough masks. And what they really need in the hospitals are N99. So what does an N rating mean? So when it's rated, N99 is a particle penetration test that's done at NIOSH, National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. So they use small salt particles to see what percentage, and they mimic bacteria and viruses, see what percentage on the high pressure will penetrate the front of a mask. And then they measure what particle count is on the other side of the mask. So if 99% of the particles do not get through, it gets an N99 rating. There's another test that's used also called the total inward leakage. And around the perimeter of the mask, when you don a mask, D-O-N, don a mask, in a healthcare setting, if you're a healthcare worker, you have to be fit formed for that mask. They have to show you how to put it on and get the correct fit for your facial configuration. There's 25 different facial configurations. So if you don't put the mask on and it's not tight enough, there'll be leakage. And basically almost all masks have various degrees of or percentages of leakage, depending on how tight you put the mask on and the type of mask it is. So most of them have a nose clip and a strap. And you have to put it on pretty tight to make a good seal. So if you go out and buy a surgical mask, for example, that's bulging from the sides, first of all, it's not an N-rated mask. It's not NIOSH rated. It's not even an N95, which gives you 95% protection and 5% particle penetration. Surgical masks really don't give you much protection, and more for the doctors getting coughing and sneezing on patients and getting, transmitting germs from their mouth. So they're near useless. Dust masks, useless. If you're going to go down to Home Depot and buy a dust mask, you're wasting your money. And there's a lot of new things I've seen on the web. These masks are very expensive. I saw one, it was a black mask, and it has these loops around it. It's not a NIOSH rated mask, and they're charging $45. And I don't think it gives you really much protection. It looks good, but it's really, maybe if you're going to rob a store, you'll protect your face from being identified, but I don't think it offers any protection against germs. So you got to be careful. Everybody's running around trying to get, they're out of masks, they're out of gloves, they're out of disinfectants. So you have to have something, but you don't want to waste your money on ineffective and useless protection equipment. So if you can get an N95, it'll help to some degree. but it's not going to give you total protection. And the thing is, are you going to wear it all day long? Most people can't do that. If you put on these masks really tight, it's going to hurt your face, and you're going to lift it up. If you remember after 9/11 downtown, a lot of the first responders had masks on, and they're walking around with the mask on their forehead because it hurt. So they still got exposed to a lot of the dust and the debris, and they all got exposed to respiratory infective materials, and ultimately they had wound up with a lot of respiratory problems. So you have to understand there's a lot of good things you can do, but nothing offers you absolute protection. But combined, when you follow all these procedures, you're reducing your risk of exposure to infectious particles. And then, of course, you got a good, solid immune system that'll protect you further. And I think all the good habits you can do to build immune competence. And the thing is, you have to look at everything from a general perspective that this is another foreign body, a foreign infectious agent. We've had many of them come into the United States who run their course, and we're going to have these in the future. So again, it's changing your habits, doing everything that you can to build your immune system, be healthier, and following the best guidelines you can to reduce your exposure. Those are the key things. So when you're listening to today is the most comprehensive set of approaches that'll protect you overall, and you're not going to get all this information from one source. And this is really an excellent format, a forum for getting all this information.
Thank you very much, Dr. Roy Spicer. Now I want to recapitulate some and add new information in, and so that it makes sense. One of the things I do when I fly, and I'll be flying in just about 7 days, because there's so few people on airplanes today, that's a very positive. Because of the coronavirus, the airlines are going out of their way to be very specific about trying to keep the plane as clean as possible. That's good. But that should be the norm. We shouldn't have to wait to a disaster for people to decide to do something right. And yet I'm always talking with people who all, mom's got dementia, dad. I've got 5 friends, all of whom their parents now have dementia or Alzheimer's, and they're not able to help themselves. So the child, as would be morally and ethically correct, is jumped in there to help them. But in the process, they've surrendered their own life, and family issues are not getting addressed, their own health issues are not getting addressed. So that's a separate issue. I'm going to do a webinar on just what to do, as detailed as this, if you have someone that you must now give up your life to be their caretaker so you don't surrender your life in the process. That'll be another webinar. But in any case, we have to pay attention so that we don't have a heart attack or a stroke or end up with food poisoning or water poisoning by being cavalier. And our whole economy now is based upon buying stuff without thinking of the consequences. Like I just saw an ad for a beer that's, get back to nature and bring in nature. And this is no, it's a beer. It's an alcoholic water. That's all it is. And yet they try to make it something more than it actually is. Like the car, being sexier. Suddenly you're like, what's his name? The actor McConaughey. That he's driving this Lincoln and he's spouting off some stupid, philosophical muse that somehow if you buy a Lincoln you're going to be a little Buddha. It's just stupid. All right, but people are now accepting that as a normal frame of information. Oh, we got the beef. No, show me that you got as much brains as you've got beef on your plate. You're overfed, too many calories, wrong food, wrong beverages, not enough clean water, a lot of dirty water. You're not filtering your water. You should be, but you don't care. At what point do we as a society take full responsibility for the outcome of our choices? For example, when I know I'm going out into an office, my own office, I'll take some 1 tablespoon of coconut oil. I'll swish it around in my mouth for 60 seconds. That protects my gums. Monolaurin is in there, which is a strong antiviral. And I'll drink it down, and that way my throat is protected. So at least for the next several hours, I've got that protection. When I'm on an airplane, I'll use Manuka honey. I'll take a little Manuka honey, let it dissolve at the back of my throat. That's protecting my throat. That's why I spray my throat, my mouth, my nose every 2 hours on a flight. And generally, most flights are 2.5 hours. And so I do it once. When I get on the flight, I do it a little later, and I'm good. I wear the little plastic gloves. Again, nobody even knows you have these on. Almost everything I do is non-discernible. When I get home from buying food, I wash every package on the outside. Then I alcohol it and let the alcohol dry on it. So at least now when I'm handling it, I'm not cross-infecting myself. When I sit down on my phone, I don't care how many times I sit down on the phone, I just spray the receiver here, I'm talking in, and the keypad. Let it sit, wipe it down. Computer and the mouse, 4 or 5 times a day. Because you go into your office, that's the most infected, germ and virus-ridden part of your office is that. And what is the dirtiest thing in a kitchen? Any kitchen, restaurant kitchen, your kitchen, sponges. I use a sponge once and I throw it away. One day. I use it for one day. I throw it in some bleach after I've used it in the morning to wash out, my blender and things I'm washing with, and then that keeps it disinfected. I rinse it. So that sponge is good. Now, sponges are not expensive. It comes to less than $1 a sponge. I'm willing to pay that. Some people, what do you mean you got to throw them away? Yeah, how long you had that? 5 years? Jesus, man. Also, at this point, you should be making sure that if anyone in your family is got a cold or flu or any virus, every day wash their clothes with some fragrance and chemical-free detergent and put a little bleach in. That'll disinfect it. All right? Never wear shoes in a house, your house. I realize that in offices and other places you have to abide by the rules of the office, but at least in your house, shoes, you leave them at the door, pick them up, and put them on a separate mat inside the door because they're filthy. You walk around, blood, urine, feces, bacteria by the gazillions are on the bottom of the shoe. Now it's on your rug, now it's on your floors. It dries, and every time there's any air current in the movement of any type, you, a dog, a cat, that goes up in the air, comes down on all the surfaces, including your breathing area. So coconut oil is a good antiviral. Manuka honey in the back of the throat, that's terrific. Now, I also want to give you what I would consider what I have, and you might want to do it yourself. You can go up online, go to some of the best places, herb stores, wherever you want. Here are some of the potencies that I would use. Vitamin D, 5,000 units a day, unless I was coming down with something, in which case I'd go up to 50,000 units for a day for 2 weeks. I would do at least 500 and up to 1,000 milligrams of olive leaf extract. I would do 300 milligrams of astragalus. I would do one of the filler parts, or what about 1/8 of a teaspoon of colloidal silver, but I prefer the spray. I'd spray it 2 or 3 times in the mouth. I would also have a whole bottle of charcoal capsules, and if I felt that I had eaten something I shouldn't have, or there's something I ate, even healthy things, which is the only thing I eat, that had bacteria that was harmful, I would take 10 of those charcoal capsules. I would also, depending upon what it was of cold or virus, I would take some echinacea, about 100 milligrams. And then with vitamin C, anywhere from 5 to 15,000 milligrams in divided doses from buffered vitamin C, and you can buffer it yourself by putting it into a protein shake. and then sipping the protein throughout the day. That way you're getting your vitamin C in, and I would take an equal amount of quercetin. Not equal. I would take half the amount of quercetin I would take vitamin C. For the average person, that would be maybe 3,000 milligrams of vitamin C and 1,500 milligrams of quercetin. I would also have some wild oregano oil. I would dilute it, and because it can be a little astringent in the throat, and I would take 1 dropper full. That's about 20 drops. Diluted in about a 16-ounce glass of liquid. And the best juicing to take to protect your immune system would be green apple, lemon, beet, pomegranate. Grapefruit, orange, and lemon juice is excellent. Watermelon and lemon juice is excellent. And celery, cucumber is excellent. Those are all good. I would stay away from sugar. If monk fruit sugar is good, has low glycemic factor, coconut sugar is good, stevia is great, and I would stay away from all the processed sugars. I would stay away from fried, deep fried, or high temperature cooked foods. Sweet potatoes are excellent to strengthen your immune system, and I would focus upon the sulfur, like garlic. I would definitely have garlic capsules in my emergency, home health kit, and onion. Eating half a raw onion a day keeps a stroke away, but also kills bacteria and viruses in your throat and intestines. Thins the blood. It's good. Lowers blood pressure. Garlic is the same thing. A great way of helping your immune system is to just bake a big clove of garlic and then mash it, put some olive oil on it, some cayenne. Cayenne is good too. At a heat unit, 1 capsule heat unit, about 42,000 heat units. That's terrific. And curcumin, generally 1,000 milligrams curcumin, will help. And a teaspoon of black cumin seed oil in a protein shake would also be beneficial. Now, these are the things, I'm not talking about the coronavirus, I'm talking about all bacteria and viruses are going to have a much more difficult time making you sick if you're doing all you can to make yourself well. But up to 70% of your body tissue is water, and the juices are about 97% water, so you can really help bring the phytonutrients, healing nutrients, all of the polyphenols into your body by having a good amount of juices, healthy juices each day into your system. Be conscious that rubbing alcohol or hydrogen peroxide, and don't drink hydrogen peroxide, don't infuse it, but it's great for disinfecting. That's why we put hydrogen peroxide on cuts. You see it all little bubble up there. Well, that's creating a oxidative reaction and killing bacteria. Make sure that you have in your emergency kit some probiotics, ideally around 20 to 50 billion per tablet. Get one that does not require refrigeration, because the healthier your microbiome in the gut, the healthier your immune system. Now, that's enough of a presentation. We're almost 2.5 hours of just nonstop information. And we're not going to be showing the film on ozone. Instead, I've selected one that I feel is far more important for everyone, and that is supercharge your immune system. But I'm going to give you a minute now to stand and stretch and go get yourself a refreshment or go to the restroom. And then when you come back, then for those of you who are watching this over or listening over a computer, you've had only audio. You'll be able to watch the video. Those of you who are listening over a cell phone and don't have the video, you'll be able to contact Glenn. There are only a couple of you, and he will see that you're able to watch the film later this week. Everyone later this week will get a copy of this coming back at you. And while you're all going away, I'm just going to take a look at a few of the questions that have come in now and try to address some of your questions. Let me go back up here. Frozen also wash? Yes. Kathleen? Yes. To improve ejection fraction in the heart? No, we're not talking about health issues today. Not personal health issues. Now, I got a lot of those questions I'm looking at here now. What's a good solvent to wash? Again, I suggested that you use apple cider vinegar is really good. Are we going to get a copy of the email? Yes. Let's see what else. And Angelica from Asheville, North Carolina. Is the webinar going to be recorded? Yes. Glenn is going to email you a link to replay. That's for everyone listening. Let's see. What about hydrogen IVs? No. How about monolaurin? Yes. That's your coconut oil, organic coconut oil. What were the compounds in the oregano oil and the olive leaf extract? Well, I just gave you those, so you have all that. And Dr. Andrew Saul, the Mega Vitamin Man, is directly in contact with Chinese and Korean doctors. Good. All right, we'll send him over the information. What about wearing gloves? Wear the disposable gloves. Yes. Anytime you're out, and this way that helps you. I've already told you about having an envelope that you put your money in and washing your money before you go out. That way you know you're not transferring bacteria and viruses onto you. Don't drink from a water fountain. You bet I don't drink from a water fountain. And Ronnie says Costco in Westbury is telling people to wipe down the handlebar in the cart now. That's good. Then we have, when do you take vitamin C, A, D, and E to build up your immune system? Put them in a shake. Put all your supplements in a shake, and then you can drink it throughout the day, so you're imparting high-quality nutrients to your immune system throughout the day. And let's see what else I'm reading. Can juice an onion? You can, but then it's going to be a little tough to take. I did that once. I only did it once. This is about 40 years ago. And my daughter was coming down with something, because all daughters will listen to you and shake their head yes, and then they get to where there's cakes and cookies, and suddenly they're going to do that. So came back, and she was coming down, so I just said, okay. So I gave her what she needed, and then I just went in, and I said, well, I'll start to juice some onion. And then I just kept juicing and juicing and juicing onion. Then I started to juice garlic, and I juiced a bunch. At the end of it, I had a whole glass of onion garlic juice, and I thought, well, what the heck can happen? God, that was a dumb thing to do. So I drank it, and about 3 minutes later, it felt like I had been punched out by Mike Tyson. And when I woke up the next day, Shelley was saying, you okay? I said, what time is it? Because I normally get up at 4 a.m. And she said, it's 10 o'clock. Well, whatever was in me, I'm sure was dead, and I'm not sure this part of my body's internal organ didn't die with it. No, I wouldn't recommend juicing onion garlic like I did, but then again, I'm used to drinking 12 ounces of wheatgrass juice, and anyone else try that, they're going to act like Linda Blair in The Exorcist and project it against someone's wall. A little eating the onion would be better, and eating the garlic would be better. All the colloidal silver is pretty much the same. It's just a percentage of it, and I would go to 500 parts per million. From who's this? Let me get up close. print is light here. Yasina, I was planning to go to the beach for spring break. Oh yeah, that's really smart. Yeah, and those are just some of the most health-minded people in the United States. They stopped playing volleyball, and now they just lick the sand for 3 hours until their skin bleeds. No, I would bypass spring break. Can I wash fruits and vegetables with acidic water? That's not going to help. I wouldn't do that. I love apple cider vinegar. Take a shot of it every morning. Good. What strength Manuka honey? Ideally 20 plus Manuka honey, 20 plus. It'll say 20 on. Richard Gale earlier discussed the COVID-19 unique virus, so I won't go into that. And how about holy basil? That's fine, but it's got to be used as part of a lot of other things. Do cold showers boost the immune system? No. Well, in some countries, such as in Japan, Sweden, I've seen it in Switzerland, in Germany, they'll go from the snow into a hot sauna or tub hot bath. That will stimulate circulation, and it's good. In New York, not so much. I get to see so much. Well, Gary said go from a hot bath right out into the snow. So I went from my bathtub, ran out in Central Park, and ran around the snow and back. Yeah, I've got those people listening in my audience. And he told you about the mask. Look at the rating of the mask. Coconut oil on the gums is good. I mentioned that. What about oil oregano? I mentioned that. The capsules? No, I want the oil. It's the oil that's got the power. And distilled white vinegar is just as effective as apple cider vinegar. Astragalus is good. The whole cruciferous family is good. And this is from Elena, what would be the one thing you'd recommend for a 78-year-old senior, sickly person who lives alone and has to go out for errands, etc.? Well, there is no one thing that I could recommend. First, I know nothing about what the sickness is, but if we're talking in the context of what we're saying today, I would recommend juicing. Now, I don't think that a 70-year-old sickly person who lives alone is going to be juicing. Maybe they're too sick to juice, but they could certainly go to any health food store and buy 32-ounce glasses of juice, in which case I would recommend green juices, to which they could then add suppressine, virtually add everything I just mentioned, stir it around and drink it down throughout the day. That would help. Are herbs as teas better than pills? No, the pills are much, much better than the herbal teas, like 100 times better. What precautions can a pregnant woman take to protect herself and child from coronavirus, and are they at higher risk? Not necessarily. It says pregnant woman and child. You mean fetus, or a pregnant woman with a separate child, because children are susceptible, but not highly susceptible. The infection and mortality rate is really mainly for older individuals with compromised immune systems. However, everything we've been discussing, everything, should apply for pregnant women. The 5G is starting to be used throughout the world. Does this contribute to lowering the immune system, making us more susceptible to infection? How do we protect ourselves from 5G? Can we do a webinar on 5G? I just mentioned that. Yes, Brian, I am going to do a webinar in the very near future. I'm writing an article today, which I hope to have done by Tuesday and broadcasted on the air at noon, on 5G, the newest information. And Wuhan the city where all this originated on the coronavirus, is also where they introduced in China the 5G. Now, is there a correlation? Is it causative? We don't know yet, but I'm very concerned. And will 5G always going to affect everyone's immune system? Absolutely, yes. But it's going to affect people living in cities, most problematic. Kids using Wi-Fi in schools, yes. The more electromagnetic pulses you're around, the greater impact it's going to have on your body. So we have all of these different elements coming together, and it's highly problematic. So I addressed most of the questions I saw. What we're going to do now is we're going to go to a film. Now, this is a very important film. I suggest you take notes. By the way, I didn't have anyone on today to talk about ozone because I've heard a lot of false statements made about it. And by the way, you can get high-dose vitamin C from any of the complementary physicians. They all are offering it. And ozone does have beneficial impact, but a lot of people are using it simply because it's profitable. I'll give you one example. I was visiting a physician, and a person in their office had been someone I'd counseled about 3 years earlier, and I gave them a protocol. And of all the things in the protocol, I suggested they contact different doctors who would do viral measurements for what they had, and then see which would be the best therapy, either intravenous vitamins with specific homeopaths and or ozone. And I never heard from the people again. I rarely do, unless it's a terminal case, and I like to monitor to see how they're doing. In any case, here this person was. So I said, how are you doing? Now, the person couldn't tell me how they were doing, but they were getting ozone 3 times a week for 3 years. And I said, but what's your blood chemistry show? We've never done a blood chemistry. I was just absolutely perplexed. So when I saw the physician, I asked them, how many of the people are you working with that you're not taking blood chemistries, and why? Well, it turns out they weren't taking blood chemistry of anyone. I would not see a doctor like that. If you see anyone, make sure that you get your blood work up for what you're being treated for, and then on a regular basis, you see what difference that therapy is making, because maybe it's not making any difference, but you're paying a lot of money, in which case you're just being ripped off, in my opinion. So good treatments mean that they have a way of monitoring your progress, sharing that with you, because no one should be on these holistic protocols indefinitely. All right? I'm just taking a look at any last ones here in case there's something. Dishwashing liquid. Yeah, you can use dishwashing liquid to wash your hands. Yeah, that's not a problem. MSM for sulfur content, that's good too. And coenzyme Q10 is good for the immune system. It doesn't impact the immune system. It's good for the heart and the brain because it enhances the mitochondria, the energy production, but that's different. And so let me just read a couple more here real quick. Nope. Okay, that's it. We're going to go to our film now, and I'll stay along to the end in case there's any final questions. Oh, wait, I was just... No, hold on. Glenn, do not play the ozone. No, I was just told that this one was not up here for some reason, so we're having a glitch on that. So what we're going to do is we will, by tomorrow, we will post supercharge your immune system. And so you can all go to our YouTube channel tomorrow and download it and watch it in its entirety. So that said, we're almost 3 hours into our webinar. I will take a few final questions now, so please ask the questions you have. We're not going to show ozone because I do not want people thinking that somehow that's going to do everything for them. It isn't. But building the immune system will help tremendously. Let me see what's coming in now. You said this is from Ivan. You said do you believe that, you said not to ingest hydrogen peroxide because it's extremely caustic. And I know there are people in the health food who've been ingesting it for a long time. They call it diluted food-grade hydrogen peroxide. Yes, it will kill viruses, but I do not want people taking that because it can kill off all the good bacteria. Remember, it's non-discriminating. It'll kill all bacteria. And for people who have any form of GERD or inflammation within the esophagus or tongue or mouth, it can be extremely irritating. So no, I do not recommend consuming that. From Morris, could the mask and glove shortage be alleviated by setting them aside for 10 days, coronavirus is eliminated after 9 days, and reusing? No, because there's also now we're seeing some rebound infections or secondary corona infections in some of the people who were cleared of the coronavirus. And by the way, there's about 90% of the people, from what I understand, I didn't read his actual statement, that Anthony Fauci said at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease that about 90% of the people who have coronavirus are eliminating it, overcoming it naturally. And so the people who are most at risk are going to be those with the weakest or most compromised immune system. And generally that's not always, but that's the elderly. But we have an awful lot of people with compromised immune systems, people with arthritis, with dementia, with massive inflammation throughout the body, with heart disease and cancers. In my opinion, all those people should be extremely cautious in what they do because they're also susceptible. Is white vinegar good for washing? Yeah, it's going to be, if you do that, yeah, it will help, but soap and water is much better. And then follow that, since you're going to be washing your hands a lot, with massaging coconut oil into your hands. White vinegar, okay, fruit vegetables? Yes, I said yes to that. You have, this is Angel. I have an 18-month baby. What can I do to protect him? Well, first of all, breastfeeding is the single best thing you can do because the baby's immune system is developed when you are creating specific antibodies to whatever the baby's been exposed to. And every time you kiss your baby, you're picking up in the baby's saliva any of the antigen, and then your body's creating antibodies and passing it right through into the breast milk. That's why breastfeeding is so important and so helping and helpful and healing. So that's what I would recommend. Also, you can't really be giving your baby that young the nutrients, but if you take the nutrients, you pass them through into the body. Just keep with organic, and if you look at a woman named Hunter, Hunter, wrote wonderful articles about the best way of feeding babies, toddlers, infants, and you could look at her work. I think her name was Beatrice Traum Hunter. Beatrice Traum Hunter. Let's see. Please repeat the daily dose of vitamin C we should be taking. Well, it's not the same for everyone. It depends upon what your exercise level is, where you live, whether it's cold or hot, how hard you're working, how much stress you're under. There are multiple mitigating factors to how much vitamin C you will use, whether you have an existing condition that is challenging your body, like if you have cancer, your body is going to need a lot more vitamin C than if you don't. So you've got to do a general, really good evaluation and biochemical evaluation. Now, Life Extension offers some evaluations to help you see how your whole immune system is functioning, and I would take it inexpensive. I would take one of those tests. Once infected, can a person get the coronavirus again? Yes, that's happened. How long should food from a takeout restaurant be reheated to eliminate the possibility of coronavirus? By the way, a pet can have coronavirus, but we don't think at this time that it's passed on to humans. And when it comes to a restaurant, it's not just the heating because it could be exposed to coronavirus. You have no idea the health of the people in the kitchen, the sanitation of the kitchen, how old something was before it was heated. And a lot of restaurants, I can tell you, from having owned restaurants and no other restaurant owners, they're not all up for throwing something away because it's reached its expiration date. And by the way, this is just an aside for your pet. I have very long-lived pets. I'm living in an environment on a ranch where that's where I'm broadcasting now. It's an animal sanctuary, and I've been living in animal sanctuary ranches or farms upstate New York in 1971 at the Fertile Farm. That's where it began. And then down in Texas at the Healing Springs Ranch, and then in New Jersey, and then back into Florida in 1996 until today. And I've taken care of thousands of animals, and some have become the longest-lived animals of that entire species. For example, the longest-living ring-tailed lemur, 33 years. And cat, 26 years. These are long lives. And partly it's because I don't feed them processed foods. They get a lot of raw foods. If you give them an egg, you give them a raw egg. But I see people putting cat food down and dog food down and leaving there the whole day. You never want to do that because even though they have strong bacteria that's able to neutralize the effects of a lot of other bacteria, they also can become weakened in their immune system, and therefore they then become susceptible to disease. So feed your cat and dog, then pick up the food and put it in the refrigerator for the exception of kibble. Then in the early evening, take it out, feed them again. Then before they go to bed, pick it up again, throw it away, start fresh the next day. And you'll have a lot better situation. Humans are no different. We keep taking food and keeping it for too long. Let's say, can an 18-year-old take 20,000 vitamin C milligrams a day? Generally speaking, for every 2 years of life, you could use up to about, I would say, 17,000 milligrams. So an 18-year-old could handle around 15,000. But what you do, you give vitamin C in a buffered form. There's your protein shake. And you don't take it all at once. You take it over a period of time, so the body's constantly utilizing it. You take it with vitamin E because then you get a longer use of it. And then you see if the person develops loose stools or diarrhea. If they have, they've reached their bowel tolerance, in which case you have to bring it back down again. From Carol, my children are doctors and are insisting I get a vaccination. Is there a compromise for me? I'm 74 and need your advice. This is an awesome webinar. Thank you, Gary. Okay, well, the one thing I can't do, I don't prescribe and I don't treat. What I do is, if you've been listening to my show or been any of my health support groups or clinical studies, I promote that which is natural, non-toxic to build up the body's immune system. But here's what I would tell your two children, and it's a fair question to ask them. Could they bring you the peer-reviewed, published literature showing that particular vaccine, the Pfizer's vaccine, show the double-blind placebo-controlled studies, and the placebo must be a saline solution, meaning a saltwater solution, so that you're not getting a comparative trial from a adjuvant like aluminum or another vaccine, because none of that is legitimate science. To be legitimate, it must be a double-blind placebo-controlled study with an inert substance. Aluminum is not inert. It's extremely neurodestructive. And let them show you the literature that it's safe and effective. Now, if they really care about you, which I'm sure they do, they will take their time and they'll provide that. Then go up and do your own homework. The articles now are a bunch on the safety and efficacy of vaccines, and then open up that particular vaccine package insert, which you can open on the internet, and it'll show you the whole side effects. And guess what was the number one side effect from the flu vaccine? The flu. From the chickenpox vaccine, chickenpox. From the measles vaccine, the number one side effect from the manufacturer was measles. So when you read down all of the side effects of taking a vaccine, and then you go to the toxicological data and you type in each one of those ingredients in the vaccine they want you to take, and you simply type in the name of the, let's say, polysorbate 80 or formaldehyde or aborted fetal cells and what line it is, and then say all toxicological data. Instantaneously from the PubMed, the peer-reviewed literature, will all stream out, at least the abstracts will. And that way, for every ingredient in that vaccine, you will have strong, independent, objective, peer-reviewed literature, and then you review it with them. Now, if the vaccine shows that it's safe, and all the studies show it, and effective, and all the studies show it, then you can at least have some confidence. But what if the science shows that there's not a single safe ingredient in the vaccine, and that there's no study showing that it's true of impact against placebo? Then that's a discussion between you and your children. I've spent more than 15,000 hours of researching before I wrote my first article on vaccines. And yet I was exposed to a Dr. Robert Mendelsohn, a wonderful physician, one of the top physicians and pediatricians in Illinois back in the early 1970s. And he came to New York to meet with me. I was just a kid, and he said, "You're the youngest person in the world of health and nutrition, yet you're the one at least making some sense. Some of these other people, they're not interested in anything about vaccines." But he was. And he says, the more research you do, the more you're going to realize the public's not getting the true and honest information they deserve. He was correct. So I've done my homework, but everyone else who's done their homework has come to similar conclusions. I would not be opposed to any vaccine or any medication, that, for that matter, as long as I could read the literature showing that it was safe and effective. So let them show you first what kind of quality research they're willing to do, and then independent of them, do your own, and then when you sit down, see where the greatest argument is made, and that's a conversation between you, not me. Because I'm quite sure they would be opposed to anything that I have to say. I've written 54 articles on vaccine. I produced 4 award-winning documentaries on vaccines, and I've never had to change a sentence in any of my work. Can they say the same thing? What can you do to protect ourselves in lieu of the fact that the masks we need are not available? Jennifer. Well, Jennifer, we can't live in an isolated environment. We have to, coexist in our society. That's why I've been telling you, become as healthy as you can be and then be as prudent as you can be. For example, if I wear plastic gloves, that you can wear. And if I use paper towels, just very discreet, to open doors and push elevator buttons, And if I have a little small bottle, like a 3-ounce bottle with a little sprayer on it, so I can spritz things. If I keep my money clean in an envelope and another envelope that I take change, which is dirty money, and then if I spray my throat and face with some colloidal silver and take some coconut oil and manuka honey, then I'm protecting myself as best I can in a public space. Mind you, it's not the large public spaces that are the problem. The biggest problem are small, confined spaces, elevators, subways, cars, taxis, small office cubicle areas where viral bacterial particles of any type can be in the air and they're contained and they'll land on surfaces. And because the droplets coming out of their mouth are heavier than the air, and then they can stay for long periods of time, and that's why wiping this stuff down is important. I would not be afraid of walking down a street. You know, it's just being very prudent. That's what I would suggest. How can children with respiratory illnesses boost their lungs and build up their immunity? That you will see when you watch the film, and Glenn will try to have that film ready up on YouTube tomorrow for everyone listening right now to watch. And what about stress and immunity in these stressful times? Well, who's that? Dwight. Dwight, it is not possible to live an unstressed life. The difference is what Dr. Hans Selye suggested. There is stress that is the normal part of life. Look, going out to, go on a date, that's stressful, but in a good way. You're excited about meeting someone that you might be compatible with and make a new friend or have a relationship. Going to a concert, to see, someone that you've appreciated their music. That's stressful, but in a good way. Finding out you might lose your job, being thrown out of a relationship, knowing someone has betrayed you, that's distress. And as Dr. Hans Selye, who is the person who brought all this distress to our attention, what it does, that's devastating to the immune system. That's what we don't want. That's what hurts us. So we need to put our energy into stress, and mindful meditation helps us and keeps the cortisol level down, because that will really play havoc with our immune system. So being able to do yoga, meditation, mindful meditation, all that will help keep us distressed and stop personalizing everything. And this is from Silvana. What about gyms? At this time, I would stay away from gyms, because people in gyms are sweating, profuse perspiration, diffuse perspiration, insensible perspiration. That means everything in a gym is totally contaminated. No, I would stay away from gyms. I would stay away from hot tubs under any conditions, a hot tub. And I would stay away from swimming pools. Now, again, this is under any condition. I have a friend of mine who teaches swimming, and he's very good at it. And he teaches about 50 people a day. Good. All good. Except that water is filled with chlorine, bad for your lungs, but also the water is loaded with feces. Because you think everyone getting in a swimming pool, public swimming pool, has properly cleaned themselves with hygienic means? No. So you're around in there in that water, and all their feces is going all over the place. Do you really want to have someone else's feces in the water going in your mouth? I don't think so. So I just, I say I'll pass on the swimming. Thanks. What do you recommend for cab drivers? A bigger tip. You're probably a cheap person. Give them more. In fact, I always do this. I especially do this with Sikhs. I'll pay for the next person's ride. I know that's not what you're asking, but it's just something I think that we should appreciate. New York City cab drivers have really got a rough time now. They're on the ropes. They're frequently having to work 2 jobs. They're underpaid, underappreciated, and Uber and the other services are putting them out of business. They bought their medallions at a high price. Now they're in the garbage, and no one's helping them. Now, more specifically to the question I'm sure you're asking, simple. I use a paper towel to open the door. I put down my little foldable seat. It's just a cushion. It weighs a couple ounces. This, the back cushion like you'd see in a driver's side, and I sit on it. Therefore, I'm not contaminating. I've got my clean money in my envelope, and I exchange the clean money, and I give them a tip, so I don't need any money back, and get out with my paper towel. And I also carry a little spray. I haven't mentioned this before, that it's a little orange spray. You can use orange or lemon, and it's really good for schoolroom, for your workspace. You just put your arm up in the air when this little squeeze, and you just press the little button, and it pushes out this essential oils of lemon or orange. There are other flavors, but these are good because they are going to kill airborne bacteria. They trap and neutralize that space. You get the wonderful after smell, and that helps you. All right? Can ginseng help improve immunity? It's not the best thing for immunity, but ginseng is still good for other reasons. And how about staying away from phys ed and therapy offices, classrooms and schools? I believe that in New York State they should close down the schools for the next 2 weeks to limit the spread, because the way most people think, they will be cavalier. Kids are extremely cavalier. They don't listen to anyone anyhow. So they're just going to be spreading, and we're going to see more and more cases of this coming from the classrooms. And I just believe we just take the time. The world doesn't stop. The economy won't stop. It can slow down in areas. But why not err on the side of caution and just stay away from everything for a couple of weeks? What about saunas? It kills viruses. You got to go real high temperature to kill a virus. No, saunas are good for you. They allow you to sweat and raise your own body temperature up, which is good. But it's not. It wouldn't be something I would say would be the best way of approaching killing the viruses. All right, so I've answered all the questions I can see here. We are 3 hours into our webinar, and past the amount of time I thought we would be spending, but you've had a lot of questions. I've tried to answer them all. So at this point, we're going to say thank you for listening. And tomorrow, when you all get, or the next day, when you get your copy of today's program, the whole webinar, all of you listening are going to get the whole thing. So if you missed any part, you can go over. If you want to get more details, you can stop and replay it. You will also be given the information of how to download Supercharge Your Immune System, so you'll be able to watch that. I'm sure you're all, after 3 hours of sitting, it's time to get up and go for a walk and enjoy the rest of your day. All right? And I will be putting together a webinar on 5G and what we can do about it, because that's a big deal as well. Have a nice day, everyone.